Hello, Jade.
Hi.
We're on.
Awesome. Okay, great.
Okay. So, I'm just going to make your video a bit bigger. And to anyone watching, this is the new screen, new YouTube video. All right. There we go. Let's get started. I'm so sorry for the delay. This
Oh, no worries.
technology is a little bit new to me, but could you please start by introducing yourself and your current career?
Sure. My name is Jayde. So similar to all of you, there are many facets to my identity. I am a lawyer, a scientist, a mother of a 2-year-old, an immigrant, and an amateur chef. But obviously, you did not come here to hear about my cooking skills, so I do want to focus on my current professional career. I am a lawyer, a patent agent, and a trademark agent. I work at William Wicks Green and Mutala LLP. Our firm is a Vancouver-based law firm. It has been consistently named as top 1 IP boutique firms in Canada. My legal practice focuses on the strategic creation and development of IP assets. In particular, I help my clients to secure patent protection and trademark protection. I have worked with a variety of local companies, including those in biotechnology, food processing, and renewable energy sectors.
Wow. And how did you get to where you are now?
Tough question. I didn't always know that I wanted to practice law. So similarly, I didn't plan to be an IP lawyer when I was in your position. Prior to being a lawyer, I was actually trained as a microbiologist. I conducted scientific research on antimicrobial resistance, phylogenetic grouping, and DNA fingerprinting of foodborne bacteria. I learned I always enjoyed learning about science, and science subject matter came relatively easy for me to master. So for a long time, I wanted to be a scientist, and I thought maybe I can be a professor in microbiology. So with that initial goal, I went to UBC. I obtained a Bachelor of Science and also a Master of Science degree. So the journey to obtain these 2 degrees was invaluable in the sense it allowed me to learn about who I am, what I'm good at, and what I enjoy doing. So what I learned that I am good at, and I enjoy talking to people about my research. I enjoyed presenting my research results. I actually enjoyed conducting both quantitative and qualitative analyses. But on the flip side, I learned I wasn't passionate about being in the lab by myself and conducting scientific experiments. But with that knowledge about myself, I knew I should not pursue a PhD degree. So back then, someone in my network suggested a career in IP law. So I kept an open mind and looked into it. I have not looked back since. As I said earlier, in my IP practice, I work with scientists and innovators to learn about their scientific discoveries and inventions. I then work with them to create IP assets to protect their research efforts. In this way, my science training complements my role as an IP lawyer. So even though I didn't plan to be an IP lawyer, I kept an open mind, which had helped me to find my dream job.
That's awesome. Very inspiring, too. So were the topics you learned in school directly applicable to your current profession?
I think so. I think my science training, again, going back to what I do every day, I help scientists and innovators to secure IP protection. So the first thing I need to do is to understand their scientific research. So my science background allows me to understand what essentially the science language. So I was able to understand what they invented, what their science discoveries are. So in that role, I am more effective because of my science training.
And could you describe what your typical day looks like?
Sure. One thing about the practice of IP law is every day is different. So that's consistent. But typically, my practice focuses on creating and acquiring IP assets. So often my day starts like this. I start my day by preparing for client meetings, where I often conduct preliminary scientific research to gain a general understanding of the technical field where my client operates in. After that, I have the client interview where I learn more about the client's projects and help the client to identify possible IP protection that may be applicable to the client. We then strategize how to obtain such IP protection. Essentially, I spend the remaining of my days implementing the strategy. So in cases of inventions, I help the client to prepare patent applications to secure patent protection. For brands and trademark protection, I prepare trademark applications and conduct different searches to assess infringement risk.
Awesome. And what is your work environment like?
Well, it has changed since COVID.
Yeah.
Currently, I'm working from home, but back in the office, I work with a variety of interesting people, and primarily they're inventors. In my professional network, everyone at my firm, we were trained as scientists first. So I think in order to help our clients to secure the most effective IP protection, we need to understand the science language that they speak. So all of our lawyers are trained as scientists first, and then we became lawyers. So my professional working environment, I work with extremely smart people. I learn a lot. We talk a lot. We have lunch and learn once a week. We can teach each other about different development in the law and just interesting technology.
Wow. Now, could you describe any challenges you faced when pursuing your field?
Oh boy, there are too many challenges to count. I will share perhaps one of the more recent challenge with you. As an IP lawyer, it is an asset to also be qualified as a patent agent and a trademark agent. The qualification exams are difficult to pass, and to illustrate how difficult the exams are, the average national passing rate for test takers is about 3% for the patent agent exam, about 30% for the trademark agent exam. So I took those exams last year, and luckily I passed them with flying colors. However, last year was such a tough year, and I made it extra tough for myself because I wasted so much time and energy doubting my ability and comparing myself to other people. So I think it is important to believe in yourself and pay attention to your own goals. I think it's often difficult to do, and I know it's difficult for me to do, and I try every day, try my best to practice it. It's so important to know who you are and don't spend a lot of time comparing yourself to other people.
That's really good advice. And now, what is your favorite part of your job?
My favorite part has to be meeting with inventors, scientists. I mean, they spend time and effort in their labs, where I personally, am, as I said earlier, I'm not particularly passionate about being in the lab doing experiments. So it's fantastic. I'm able to meet those scientists and learn about their research projects and able to work with them to develop IP strategy to protect their efforts.
Awesome. Now, what are your career goals for the future?
If you can believe it, despite having 3 degrees, I'm actually going back to school for more punishment. A short-term goal of mine is to obtain a Master of Law in IP and Technology from UC Berkeley. The hope is it will help me to better serve my clients to secure IP protection in the state and perhaps open up more teaching opportunities. And for my long-term goals, I aim to keep learning and take risks and keep discovering who I am.
Thank you so much, Jayde. Everyone who's watching now, this is Jayde Wood, and she's a lawyer, a patent lawyer with multiple degrees in science and law. Thank you so much for starting our conference to a great start.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye. Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Maia Poon and I'm the chair of Quantum Leaps Burnaby. So sorry for the technological difficulty, but I'm glad that you're all finding this live stream today. Now we're pretty much on schedule and our next speaker will be Dr. Paloma Corvalan. Dr. Paloma has a PhD in animal behavior and she loves teaching people about ways to reduce their plastic waste. She serves as the Youth Engagement Board Director at SWIST and the Development Manager at C-Smart. With so many inspiring jobs that she holds in inspiring youth to pursue science, she's certainly going to inspire us today. Hi, Paloma. Hi, Paloma.
Hi, how's it going?
Good, thanks. So, could you please introduce yourself and your current career?
Yeah, definitely. So, just to confirm, is the live stream going on right now?
Yes, it's on a different link because I had to restart, but
okay.
Everyone can see you now.
Oh, that's great. Well, hi everybody. Sorry, it caught me a little bit unprepared. I didn't realize that the presentations were going on right now.
No worries.
But I have a little presentation that I can share with you all. Let me just get that set up. So yeah, I'm Paloma, and I currently work with C-Smart. We are a charity that teaches people about protecting our oceans, and we do a lot about teaching about plastic pollution. And I wanted to tell you a little bit more about my journey here, because I have a PhD in animal behavior. That's my background, and now I do a lot of teaching. And for all of the there you go.
Nice.
Can everyone see a full screen? Is that working, Maya?
Yeah, I think it should be working.
Great. So for everyone listening, I know that a lot of you are currently in your last couple years of high school, and you maybe are a little bit unsure about what you want to do later on. You really potentially like to do science, and that's where I was at too when I was in my last couple years of high school. So this is me in high school. This is Maya. Can you confirm that the presentation is working?
Yes, great. People are letting me know it's working.
Great, thank you. And sorry for the poor quality of the picture. I took this from my yearbook. I couldn't find any pictures of me that weren't of me doing silly things in high school. In my last year, my favorite subjects were biology and chemistry, so I was really into science. And I loved doing sports. I loved volunteering, so I did student council, I did yearbook, I organized events for our school, and of course, spending time with friends and socializing was a huge priority for me too at that time, so along with studying. And that's why I chose to go to UBC. I grew up in Switzerland and Geneva, and so going to Canada was a bit of a big change for me, but what I knew about North American schools and about UBC is that they had a lot of clubs there, and so there's a lot of opportunity for me to be involved in other aspects than just academics. But at the same time, UBC is ranked in the top 50 universities around the globe, and so being in a top university was also a priority for me. Given that I loved biology and chemistry, I enrolled to do biochemistry. I thought, okay, I love evolution, learning about Darwin's finches. I love chemistry. So this is a picture of me here with a chemistry. This was for Christmas. And in chemistry class, we would make things like, we would make beer, we would mix different chemicals together and have many explosions and foam and create it. It was all very exciting. But then when I got to university and I started biochemistry, this is what we were learning about. Things in very fine detail about what was going on in cells on a cellular level, in a really microscopic level. And I realized that, hey, I loved both those different aspects, but coming to university, biochemistry just wasn't of interest to me. And so I really honed in on biology being what I prefer. And so that's just to show you that you might go to university thinking you're going to do one thing, but what's great is that as you're doing your undergraduate, you can switch between different fields. So think about what you like, and then you can funnel when you get there. And within biology, what I fell in love with was ecology. So ecology, we learn about the relationships of organisms to each other and to their physical surrounding. And when you Google ecology, these are some of the first images that come up. And this is what really resonated with me, thinking about the world being interconnected, caring for our planet, and a lot of greenery. We need a lot of plants to make sure that we have a sustainable future. At university too, they make you take electives when you go to university like UBC. And I thought that this for me on a personal level was fantastic because I would have only taken biology classes if I had the choice of what I was going to do. But with my electives, I ended up taking psychology and also falling in love with this subject. So understanding the human mind, our behaviors, and how that affects one another. So I ended up graduating with a Bachelor of Science in Ecology and Environmental Science and a minor in Psychology. I did my honors, so that's what the HONS means. That means that in my last year of university, I did an extra research component. I had to do a few extra classes. And what was great about doing honors in my undergrad is that paired along with a lot of research experience I did over the summers and as a research assistant as a job after I finished my undergrad, allowed me to go straight from my undergraduate to a PhD. So that's a potential option for those of you who are thinking you really love research and you might want to do a PhD if you want to fast track that. So I went to the University of Queensland in Australia to do my PhD in animal behavior. What's cool is that animal behavior, another synonymous word for that is behavioral ecology. So this was really cool to find out there was a way to link up my passion for ecology and my love for psychology in this field. I studied kangaroos in the wild, and because we didn't want to tag them and affect their behavior because we were studying their behavior, we had to name them and just recognize them from their facial features. So you might have thought that kangaroos all look the same, but if you take a look at these 4 pictures here, you can see that there's actually quite a lot of variation in their facial morphology, their ear shapes, their sizes, their coloring, and this is all the same species. These are all eastern grey kangaroos. And the males have indeterminate growth, which means they continue, females do too, but the size difference is smaller. But that means that they continue to grow with age, so size was also a great way for us to know who was who. I studied their social behaviors and was looking to see who they spent time with and was trying to figure out if their sociability was linked to their fitness. during my PhD, I also did a lot of teaching, and this was imparting my knowledge to others, sharing my passion for research, for biology, was something that was just very rewarding to me. So I used to go out to rural schools in Queensland where students would never have been exposed to meeting a scientist as part of a program called Wonder of Science. And I also taught as a teaching assistant in numerous courses. And this is what led me to, when I came back to Vancouver, to seek a job at C-Smart, teaching kids about something I really care about. Because right now our environment is under threat from human impacts. And it's up to us to not only just change our behaviors, but also be requesting on a government level and requesting our businesses to change their practices for a more sustainable future. And teaching kids is a sort of an area that you can reach where they're at that age, they haven't yet made up their minds, and they're very receptive to wanting to care for the planet. So with C-Smart, we bring kids outdoors too. We teach them about marine organisms. We do beach cleanups. And it's great because connecting kids to nature is so important for them to want to help to take care and protect our planet. So these are some kids doing a beach cleanup. You would be surprised, in Vancouver, the beaches look really clean because there are people who come by and clean up the bigger pieces. But when you actually go and start picking up all of the tiny pieces, especially cigarette butts, you'll find that we'll do this for an hour with the kids, and we'll pick up 1,000 cigarette butts. And you see the bucket behind there, we can easily pick up, get 10 full buckets of trash. So there might not seem to be a lot, but it's there. And we also go out to school, so, reaching kids directly where they are with really hands-on activities to get them excited about learning about science and about protecting the environment. So I wanted to share a little bit with you today about plastic pollution and how that's affecting marine life. So one thing we know, one thing is very visible, is the big amounts of plastic debris that we have. Animals are getting entangled in these, and we've recorded about 100,000 animals a year die from being tangled up in nets and from ingesting plastic. So here you can see a seabird that has a lot of plastic in their stomach. And research has shown that we were kind of wondering, why are seabirds eating so much plastic? Are they starving and they have no other choice? One of the potential reasons is that plastics, they absorb chemicals in the environment. And one of the chemicals they absorb, dimethyl sulfide, it's a chemical that gets released by algae. And it's a chemical cue that seabirds are attracted to because krill eat those substances, and then other animals eat those krill. And so seabirds, that's a chemical that they might think is associated with their prey. So they might be eating excess amounts of plastic because of that chemical signal. One of the rising concerns with plastic is microplastics. So these are less obvious to us as to the consequences of this right now. But as we're dumping more and more plastics into our oceans, this is going to be a much larger issue. And scientists are really warning us that we need to be taking this seriously right now. So microplastics are really the tiny particles of plastic debris. And you get that from, when you wash your clothes, or even in the plastic production process, a lot of those little plastic debris can get lost. And larger pieces of plastic also breaking down into smaller pieces. Plastic debris, it's hydrophobic, and it absorbs and binds to other substances that are hydrophobic. So PBTS, these are chemicals that are persistent in the environment, so they don't break down easily. They're bioaccumulative, So when you have them, and an animal ingests them in their bodies, it stays in their tissues, and then another animal ingests it and it stays in their tissues, and they get more and more. So as you go up in the food chain, it bioaccumulates. And they're toxic. So we know that in larger quantities, so maybe upper in the food chain, when they have really in high amounts, then it has toxic effects on animals' bodies. Because my background is in animal behavior, I also wanted to bring in a study about these periwinkles that there's a study that shows that when they were exposed to water that had these plastic in them, that had absorbed chemicals from seawater, that they were no longer able to respond in a normal way to their predator, the crab. So their response to the crab is a chemical response. So they sense the crab nearby and they'll retract into their shell as a form of protection. But when the chemicals, due to the plastic that was in the water, were present, then that disrupted the signal. And then when the crab chemical cue was present, the periwinkles did not go back into their shell. So that's showing that there's some behavioral effects too from these chemicals. So that was just a short introduction to some of the impacts that plastic pollution can have. There's a lot more to it. There's lots of tips online of how you can personally live with less plastic. And of course, individual behavior change is a great first step. But what is really important is for us to realize that, that there's a lot more impact that we can have. One of the ways that businesses have been telling us have been manipulating us is into making us believe like we were in charge of creating the change that we want to see. Whereas what we've seen in recent years with the movement with plastic pollution is that we have the ability to change government policies too. And we have the ability to request from businesses that they change their behavior. Otherwise, we'll no longer be a consumer. So there's definitely those upper levels that actually are probably more impactful. But at the same time, I think that making individual behavioral changes is what gets you into the movement of then requesting your governments and your businesses to change their practices. So definitely start with some individual behavioral changes, and I'm really happy to chat more with you about these. If you're interested, please ask in the chat or you can get in touch. But there's lots of information online too.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Paloma, for sharing your research from kangaroos to plastic waste and all the important work you're doing. One of the questions I have for you is, what is the most rewarding part of your job?
I think, right now working with C-Smart, that's one of the big motivations is the interaction with the kids that you have. And I think the most rewarding part for me is when we're doing beach cleanups with the kids. And we've had some days where it's rainy, it's cold, it's windy. And I'm just thinking, wow, the kids must be having a really rough time. But instead, I go up to kids and they're like, wow, I never thought I could have so much fun picking up trash. Mm-hmm. And that's when you're like, okay, this is great. Like, this is why we're doing this. And those sort of experiences when you're a kid really shape what you value and your views as an adult. And I just think it's so important for us to be funding environmental education, really pushing forward for it.
Thank you so much, Paloma. That brings us to the end of our time with you, but as Paloma said, you can ask her any questions in the chat, and we'll be providing her contact information as well after. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
You too. All right, hello everyone. Our next speaker is Dr. Jen Engle, and she is a neuropsychologist at BC Children's Hospital. She conducts assessments of children with brain-based disorders and connects these evaluations to the children's brain functioning. We have a lot to learn from her. Hi, Jen. You're on our live stream now. We can't hear you right now. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Jen? Jen, are you connected now? We still can't hear you. We still can't hear you. We still can't hear you. No. Okay. Right. Okay. While we're reconnecting with Jen, I'll just go through a few of our thank yous. We would like, okay, she's back. Let's see. I will do that later.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Hi, Jen. Thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Sure.
All right. Could you please introduce yourself and your current career?
Sure. My name is Jen Engle. I'm a pediatric clinical neuropsychologist. I work at BC Children's Hospital here in Vancouver, Canada. So neuropsychology is it's a specialty area of psychology, and it focuses on understanding the relationship between your brain and your thinking skills and behavior.
Awesome. And how did you get to where you are now?
Well, I was, when I was an undergraduate, I started getting really interested in how the brain, it works, and brain development and child development. So I chose to major in biopsychology, and that was something that I found just really interesting, everything about it. I wanted to read more about it, books about it. When I finished university, I still didn't know what I was going to do. I worked in public health for a little bit, but I was missing some of the science. And so I started asking around about what kind of career options might be available. And I had a family friend who was a neurologist and who mentioned this field of neuropsychology. So I started looking into it and applied for a program. It's a PhD program. And so I went to the University of Victoria, where I got my PhD.
Were the topics you learned in university and high school directly applicable to your job today?
Yeah, the interesting, because it's a clinical program, so I'm a clinical psychologist. The training is very hands-on, so you do a lot of practica, many different experiences where you get to actually work with people and do the job, not just learn. And then the last year of a clinical psychology degree is a full year of residency. So I did that at Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto. And so I had a full year of basically working under supervision and very hands-on learning at that time.
Could you describe what your typical day looks like?
Sure. I feel like maybe I should back up and tell you a little bit more about what neuropsychology is.
Sure.
Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I could tell you I sit in an office and meet with kids, but until we know more about it, it doesn't make a lot of sense. What neuropsychologists, some neuropsychologists are researchers. Some are, like myself, do primarily clinical work, and some do both. So the clinical work, the clinical piece of it is actual one-on-one with a patient. So I meet with, the work that I do at the hospital is specialized for children and adolescents who have either a neurological disorder or a medical condition that's impacting their brain functioning. So there has to be something going on with their brain where things are not going quite right, and some things impacting either their thinking skills and or their behavior and emotional functioning. So for example, I work with a lot of children who have severe epilepsy. Some of them are even being considered for surgery, where they take a piece of the brain out, the piece that's causing the seizures. I work with children who have traumatic brain injuries or other conditions like meningitis or encephalitis, which have left somebody with a difference in how their brain's working. So what I do is I meet when I'm doing the assessment days. So you asked about a typical day. An assessment day would look like I sit at a table with a child, and we do activities together. So those would be things like an IQ test, a test specific cognitive functionings like memory, attention, higher level skills, sometimes motor skills and visual spatial skills. And this helps me understand how their brain is actually working. Whereas like a neurologist may have a picture of the brain on an MRI, and it shows what the brain looks like and where problems are. This is actually how is it working? How does it function when you ask it to remember things? So I do that probably 2 days out of my week. I have assessment days, and usually they take most all of the day. Kids have to work pretty hard to do a lot of activities, get through with me. And then the other days I will do things like feedback. So the family comes back on a later day and we talk about the results of the assessment. Other things I do are I do some research and I do supervision of students. I meet with teams. So like the people who refer to me, I might have consultations with them. I have multidisciplinary rounds where different professions come together and talk about patients. So there's a lot of different interesting parts to my job, but the big part is doing the assessment days.
What advice would you have to someone hoping to pursue your career?
I would say the biggest piece of advice, well, I love my job. It's really a dream job. I look forward to going to work, and I feel like I'm always learning, which is great. But it is a long road to get here. So I always tell people, if this is what you want to do, be really sure it's what you want to do, because it is a lot of work to get to be done with your degree and ready to work.
And do you have any big career goals for the future?
Yeah, you know what? One of the lovely things about working where I do at the hospitals, I get to do new and interesting projects all the time. So last year, we decided to start a pilot project where when kids have had a recent brain injury, and we're in hospital for that, we provide them with a brief screening assessment to help their school and their family and their rehab team and get an idea of what's going on with them right now at this moment to help plan for what they need in the immediate next couple months, because we know their brain is still healing and still improving, but we know that there's this time period where they're gonna need extra help and support, and we want to make sure we get in there to get them the right help and support. So that was a new project that we launched just because we saw there was a need for it and a gap, and we were able to just say, hey, let's do this, which is great. And then so what's next is a big research project that's coming up now, especially now with COVID going on. I have had a lot of time to turn away from my clinical work to research. So we are working on putting in 20 years of data into a database so that we can start asking some research questions of our data.
Nice. How has the coronavirus impacted the hospital environment?
Oh, interesting. It's, I don't work in the inpatient units. I essentially almost only do outpatient work. So that outpatient work has really stopped. In fact, we don't do, because it's not considered urgent, all of our appointments are canceled. So that's a big impact for our patients and us at this time. Basically, everyone's on hold and waiting until things start moving again and we are ready to see non-urgent patients, then we'll be able to start our assessments again. So right now we're able to do things like phone consults, screening, collecting parent and teacher questionnaires, but we really can't be doing in-person assessments. I would say what I've heard from the hospital in general is that overall things are pretty quiet, but everybody is quite anxious because they're worried. But things are going well, smoothly, and people are, taken care of, and I don't think it's actually way less busy than usual because of all the things that have been canceled.
So you brought up the database that you're currently entering data into. How has the improved technology changed your job over the year?
Has it changed the what for the year?
How has improved technology changed your job?
Oh, it changed our job. Oh, yeah. I think that things are changing a lot. So when I started graduate school, there was very few tests that were done on computers. There was a couple even back then. One of them was like a freestanding unit that had a big button in the middle and you press the button. So most everything that from historical neuropsychology is person to person, but that's changing. So now as test publishers come out with new tests, most all of them are giving some kind of computerized option. Some of them are going all computerized now. So things are definitely changing. We're adapting. Some of the things we do with kids, instead of having a flip book of paper, we have 2 iPads and they have an iPad and we have an iPad. So yeah, the world is definitely changing and we're keeping up with that, hopefully.
Have you had any experience with telemed and calling patients?
Yeah, so in regular times, when we see families from all over BC, and sometimes after we see them, they go home to maybe 8 hours away, and we want to follow up with them to give them information and give them feedback, but it doesn't make sense for them to come down here to do that. So in the hospital, they have a great telehealth setup so that family would go to their local hospital, and we would go to a room down the hall that's set up with these huge computer screens and high technology, and you press a button and then they're in the room with you and you're talking to them, which is lovely. And you have a lot of tech support and people to help with that. And that is as easy and smooth and great. The things that people are doing now are much, much more complicated when you're trying to do things from home with home technology and home interruptions and home Wi-Fi. This is a whole nother story. And it's for some purposes, like, for example, my colleagues who are in neurology, they're doing great. They're just virtual visit after virtual visit. Most of them are used to doing some of that already for the families who live far away, and they're just expanding it to everyone. But what we do in neuropsychology, because it is very hands-on, it requires looking at things together, handing things back and forth, moving things with your hands. The kind of work I do really can't or really shouldn't be done from a distance, at least at this point in our technology.
Mm-hmm. Could you describe some of your university courses and what you learned?
Did you say tell about the university courses?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, my very favorite, I think my first term, I had a class with somebody who is now quite a famous researcher, I think a psychologist. Her name was Marianne Wolf, and she was teaching Intro to Child Development at the time. And she was really passionate about the brain, and she made it very real. One day, she came in with a cauliflower and chopped it in half and showed us the half of it and said, "That's what the cerebellum looks like." And then she tossed it to someone in the audience and said, "That's what it's for. Timing, quick timing reactions and motor functioning." And so the kind of things that, to me, it brought it to life, and it made it so real and interesting. And I think that was definitely what kind of set me down this path of being interested in brain functioning. But that was one that I really, really liked. And that was an intro to child development. I don't think they're all quite as interesting as that. But that was, she was a great professor. So, yeah.
Nice. What changes can you see in mental health care due to the anxiety rising from coronavirus?
Yeah, I think we can probably all appreciate that everybody is struggling right now. And, I think it's for people who struggle with, so many people struggle with anxiety. All of us do to some extent, but some people struggle quite a lot with anxiety in their everyday life, even outside of what's going on now. And I think what I just imagine is that it's even harder to deal with right now for people. And the isolation on top of that has got to be just so difficult because we're such social creatures. And that's where so many of us get our comforts and being physically limited too, I think is hard because for a lot of people that physical outlet can be, really good for the anxiety. Yeah.
And could you talk a bit about the coworkers you have and their different disciplines?
Sure. Well, there's a lot of psychologists at BC Children's Hospital, and we each do different things. Some of them do inpatient therapy or outpatient therapy. Some of them focus on, there's ADHD clinic and people who sort of specialize in all different areas. But I also have really great colleagues across the hospital. So, nurse coordinators, speech and language therapists, occupational therapists, neurologists are probably the ones we work with closest. They're the ones who refer most of their patients to us. And so, for example, neurology, I mentioned briefly before about epilepsy surgery. So BC Children's, I believe, does about, I want to say 35 to 40 surgeries a year in epilepsy. And so all of those kids get a multidisciplinary evaluation. So they see the neurologist, and then when their regular neurologist needs help with their epilepsy, they go to an epileptologist who is a neurologist specialized in epilepsy. And then there's a neurosurgeon. And then there's a few other folks. So myself, the neuropsychologist, and then other people who come in for special assessments, like somebody who comes in to do an fMRI to actually map their own pathways in the brain. So it has them go into a scanner and map their language pathways, map their motor pathways. And then somebody who specializes in neuroradiology, so looking very carefully at what that, could that be a tumor or could that be a malformation? And so all of us get together every 2 weeks and we talk together about the patient and each give our little piece. The epileptologist is sort of the center of that team, the main treating person, and the rest of us sort of give our input into it. And then the neurosurgeon does the surgery. Yeah, and we all follow up with them afterwards. So I would follow up 1 year after surgery to repeat my assessment with those patients. So that gives you an idea of maybe how some of us work together at the hospital.
Yeah, for sure. So thank you, Dr. Engle, for sharing your insight on the hospital and coronavirus and mental health and, of course, neuropsychology. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and thank you for taking the time.
You're very welcome.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Our next speaker is Alyssa Kirlin, a PhD candidate in biochemistry and molecular biology at the University of British Columbia. She is passionate about science outreach and is a coordinator with Let's Talk Science. Last year, Alyssa led a workshop at our in-person conference involving extracting DNA from bananas, which was very popular. Let's hear what she has to say this year. Hi, Alyssa.
Hello?
How are you?
I'm all right. And how are you?
Right, you're on our live stream now, so I'm gonna start asking some questions.
Sure.
Could you please introduce yourself and your current career?
Yeah, so my name is Alyssa Kirlin. I am currently a PhD candidate at the University of British Columbia in their Biochemistry and Molecular Biology program. My work focuses on understanding how DNA is packaged and how that packaging is regulated, and in particularly how the various enzyme complexes that regulate this packaging recognize specific chemical modifications that help them find where they need to go. And the particular subclass of proteins that I study is really important because in humans, they're pretty much all implicated with one kind of cancer or another. And a lot of the complexes that they're found in are involved in developmental disorders and cancer as well. So by getting a better understanding, we hope to be able to better understand what's going on in disease and how we might be able to treat it.
How did you get to where you are now?
Oh boy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it started when I was in grade school, actually, and I first learned about genetics. And I thought it was really cool. And it was pretty simple genetics. It was just kind of your basic Punnett squares and blood typing. So nothing too crazy. But it got me really interested in the field. And as I continued going through school, through junior high and high school, that interest stayed. So that when I got to university, I was really interested in biomedical sciences. And so I started taking classes in biochemistry, in genetics, in immunology, even a little bit. And ultimately that led to me majoring in biochemistry, which gave the opportunity to do an undergraduate honors thesis, which exposed me to research labs and just the larger enterprise of scientific research. And I really enjoyed the experience. So from the honors thesis, I then did a master's degree, and now I'm finishing the suite of degrees with a PhD in the field. So that's very broadly.
Amazing. You already touched on this a bit, but what topics carried on from undergrad and high school into your PhD?
Well, genetics started, and the other one that picked up was chemistry. It's really easy to get, discouraged a little bit when you're especially in high school, when you have to, and I think high school math is where you really get it, where they teach you all these things and it's hard to, and it seems very abstract and it's hard to get at the practical applications of a lot of these things. And so there were aspects of high school chemistry that is, and a lot of the math actually underlying high school chemistry that eventually carries on and becomes more complicated and more applied as you continue on, especially in kind of the natural sciences. And so there were things like, calculating molarity and concentration and changes in concentration when you're making dilutions, which I remember when I learned it in high school seemed like busy work. And now it's stuff that I use almost every day. And then as you hit university, things start becoming a lot more practical. Of course, over the course of a 4-year undergraduate degree, you take a lot of courses and not all of them will be directly applicable as you go on. But if you continue on in your major, those courses tend to become more practical. Whether it was like laboratory courses where I was learning hands-on skills or learning the theory that underlies a lot of the concepts that I'm now at the, cut in the very frontier of researching human understanding in that subject. The basics still call back to things I learned in, say, second-year biology.
What does your typical day look like as a PhD candidate?
Yeah, so at this point, because I'm almost at the end, my day pretty much resembles a full-time laboratory research job. So I go to work, in a lab, and I pretty much spend my whole day either at my lab bench doing experiments or sitting at my desk reading scientific papers or writing up my own results to publish in scientific journals, or currently I'm actually writing my thesis so I can graduate. And so that's the lion's share of what I do. But in addition to that, we have meetings. So every week I have a number of meetings with my lab mates, with collaborators, discussing scientific projects. I also do a little bit of teaching. or I did up until the start of the coronavirus pandemic. So what that looked like for me was I spent half a day at UBC helping teach a laboratory course for third year undergraduate students. And so that's most of my day-to-day. Sometimes these tasks do bleed over into the evenings and the weekends. But generally, I like to manage my time so that I can try to be kind of Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 as best as possible. Although in science, that's not always possible because sometimes experiments are timed in such a way that you have to be there on, say, a Saturday to finish it or on a Sunday to get it started.
Nice. Did you face any challenges when pursuing your field? And what advice would you have for someone hoping to enter biochemistry?
Are there specific kinds of challenges you're looking to?
Anything, academic or personal.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to think how best to answer this. So some of this is going to be very person dependent. For me, part of my struggles was that I didn't want to stay at home for university. So I left home. So I'm from Winnipeg originally, and I chose to go to university in Ontario, which was a great experience, but it did mean I was away. And so as I was pursuing my field, and this continued especially not so much in undergrad, but once I started graduate school. So once I started my master's and then again in my PhD, I was picking where I was living and my schools based on the professors who I wanted to work for and where they were, which meant I had to be very flexible to move. And it meant moving to cities and living in cities where I didn't have any friends. And that they were further away, or at least initially I didn't have any friends, and further away from my family. And that created a number of struggles because you miss things, of course. There's lots of good that comes out of this because you meet new friends, meet new people. Some of my best friends in the world are people I've met because I left home. But at the same time, it's meant that I'm not as close as I used to be with some of my friends from high school who I love dearly and grew up with, but we don't see each other very often. And for me personally, while I've been away at school, my parents have both had pretty significant health issues. And I'm lucky that they're both alive, but it was definitely really hard to be pursuing science, especially in one case, science that's closely related to some of the health issues they were having. So my mom is a breast cancer survivor. And so when you do cancer research, it's very close to home. And at the time that she was going through it, I was in a lab directly doing cancer research. Now I'm a little bit further removed. And so that was hard, not being there for them and with them, but also being confronted with like the numbers and the biology behind the, very human experience my mom was having. So that's been part of it. The other struggle I would say is graduate school is a marathon. It's a slog. And you really have to work to have, mental health supports and stuff like that. And I think a lot of graduate students struggle with mental health at one point or another. And so stuff like that. And like for me personally, a lot of it was brought on because I had a concussion a few years ago. And that caused a lot of, inability to work that then made me feel bad. And it kind of spiraled a little bit. So my one suggestion is to make sure that you make time for yourself, you maintain a good work-life balance, and that if you are struggling to get the help, to seek out help, whether that's from, a personal support network or professional help, or even just being honest with your colleagues if you're going through a rough time, which can be really hard to do because it's really scary sometimes to be open and vulnerable about things you're struggling with.
That's really good advice, and thank you for sharing your story.
Oh, of course.
Could you talk a bit about the current research you're doing?
Yeah. So I work on a protein family called the Yates domains. And so what they do is they are found in larger enzyme complexes. So for those of you who are familiar with kind of how enzymes function, we often think about them as these small little molecular machines that catalyze chemical reactions. And a lot of these enzymes are actually found in these large complexes. So you'll have the enzymatic subunit that does whatever it is that it's going to do. And then it's got all these different accessory modules that are other proteins that bind to it to form this large complex that gives extra function and supporting functions. And so the proteins that I study are one of these supporting functions. And primarily what they do is they help recognize where the enzyme is supposed to function, and they bind to it. And then they bring the rest of the enzyme complex over, so the enzyme complex is in the right place at the right time. And so that's what I study. And so largely my work has looked at taking a step back. So I use yeast as a model organism. And in yeast, there are 3 proteins that have this domain that I study. And so I was trying to understand how similar and different they were from each other, and to see if there were any common or even different unique things that can then maybe be translated into the human work. And from there, trying to understand how important it is for them to recognize the specific signals that are found inside the cell. Because biology does a lot of really amazing things with a fairly limited number of molecules. If you think about proteins, there's only 20 amino acids that make up, all the proteins. And beyond that, when you think about the various chemical signals in the cells, there's, while there's a large number of them, that number is limited. And so there's lots of things in the cell that look like each other. And so some of the more recent work I've been doing has been trying to understand, if there's something that looks kind of similar but not quite the same as what, my molecule recognizes, will it still go there? And how specific are these things really?
Interesting.
Yeah. Is that the right kind of detail you were looking for?
Yeah, for sure. So what kind of experiments in the lab would you be doing?
So a lot of what I do is I grow yeast. I grow a lot of yeast in large flasks. And then from there, I can do a number of different things with it. So sometimes we just want to look at the levels of a particular molecule in the cell. So to do that, we'll prepare something called whole cell extract, which is a solution that basically takes everything out of the cell, breaks the cells open, and solubilizes it all. So then we can then analyze that solution. And typically the way we analyze that solution is through a technique called electrophoresis. And generally I'm looking at the proteins. So protein gel electrophoresis is a technique where we make a gel. And so gels are porous. They're kind of like a mesh. And so you can put this protein sample at the top of this gel and then run it through using an electrical current. And what this causes is for the protein sample to separate out by size, because the smaller proteins will be able to travel through the mesh faster than the bigger proteins. And then once you have that, we generally will switch to a technique called Western blotting, where we take the gel, we put it up against a membrane that is very sticky, so proteins like to stick to it, and we apply an electrical current to get the proteins to leave the gel and to go onto this membrane. And from there, we can probe the membrane with things called antibodies, which are very similar to the antibodies that your immune system makes to fight off disease, by the way. But what they allow us to do is to specifically look and measure the levels of and identify the presence of various molecules that we're interested in. So I do stuff like that. The other things I'll sometimes use, because these antibodies are actually very useful, is sometimes we'll use a different application where we'll have the antibodies bound to something solid. So typically like either a tiny little magnetic bead or some sort of porous support. And we can then incubate that with whole cell extract. And anything the antibody recognizes will come down. And so this is a technique called immunoprecipitation. And it helps us understand how proteins are interacting with each other. And so it's a technique I use a lot because I'm trying to see if I make mutations in the protein I study, will it change what proteins it interacts with? So those are kind of my 2 very much bread and butter techniques. But from there, I also use techniques like quantitative PCR to measure the levels of RNA. So typically looking at specific genes, whether or not they're being expressed at higher or lower levels. And more recently, a technique called chromatin immunoprecipitation, or CHIP, which allows us to look at where in the genome different proteins are binding. And so for me, it's an important technique because I study proteins that bring enzyme complexes onto DNA and chromatin to change its structure. So we use CHIP to identify where in the cell they're binding.
How are labs being impacted by the coronavirus right now?
Oh boy. So there are some labs that work on coronavirus directly or related immunology topics. So they've been able to continue working because they've shifted their work. And they're doing a lot of really important research to understand how coronavirus functions, or in some cases, I actually have a friend who's working to try to develop alternative testing methods by applying like laboratory reagents versus like clinical reagents. in case we ran into a shortage. So those labs are pretty much running sort of business as usual. But a lot of labs have had to shut down. So my work is not related to viruses and immunology. So our lab is on work from home right now, which for me has meant a lot of writing and a lot of reading and not a lot in data analysis. So doing what I can with the data I have currently because I can't go into the lab to generate more data. A number of my colleagues, however, are bioinformaticians. So they analyze large data sets using statistics and by writing code and stuff like that. And so they're pretty much working normally, except at home rather than in the lab, because all their data is just on computer servers that they can access remotely. So that's been personally, I'm stuck away from my lab bench and not being able to work. And then there's kind of the third angle, which is the labs that have to kind of maintain essential reagents. So typically these are labs with model organisms that you can't just throw in the freezer. So I'm really lucky. I work with yeast. I can just put yeast in the freezer, and then when I'm ready to work with it again, I can take them back out, heat them up, and they'll start growing. But for some of my colleagues who work on things like fruit flies or mice, they have to come in on a much more reduced schedule to kind of keep their animals alive, but they can't do any research. So in a lot of cases, it's meant, it's actually been very disruptive because they've had to reduce the number of animals they have. So a friend of mine who works on fruit flies had to basically throw out a bunch of experiments she had going and just keep her breeding sets alive to keep her cell lines, but anything expanded she had to get rid of. So in that regard, it's actually been really tough.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. In the future after coronavirus, what kinds of career goals do you have?
So my major career goal is to move into policy work. So while I've been a PhD student, I've done a lot of science outreach, and it's really driven home to me how important scientific literacy is. And so I'm really interested in bringing kind of my knowledge about science into a way that can better directly serve the public through making connections between scientists and the government, and then also to the public. And to ensure that, the laws and policies that are being made here in Canada are in line with evidence and knowledge. So I'm currently, I've done a bit of work here and there, kind of volunteering with groups. But my hope is once I'm finished my PhD, I can then apply that knowledge more broadly as a policy analyst or a similar position.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have any other advice you'd like to share for someone hoping to enter biology?
Yeah. Trying to think, because there's lots of different pieces of advice I can offer. I think the biggest piece of advice I like to give people coming from high school into university is to don't be afraid of your professors and your TAs. Especially, I remember going through university, biomedical sciences. There were so many different courses, and there was electives, and there was a lot of cool stuff. And the professors are really smart, and even the teaching assistants were smart too, and they can be scary and intimidating because some people will tell you, they get so many emails, they're never going to answer, and I think sometimes high school teachers like to instill a bit of fear and misconceptions about what university is like. In terms of, say, when they tell you things, they're not going to care, and to a certain extent, when you're in a class of 500 people, yes, it's hard for professors to care about all the students, but unfortunately, I really took heart to a lot of the scary things that my high school teachers told me. And I was afraid of all of my professors for 2.5 years. And in a lot of ways, very needlessly afraid. Because once I started talking to them, you realize that most professors are just big geeks about what they study and what they teach. And if you're interested in it and want to talk to them about it, most of them are really happy to share and talk about their experiences and answer questions about what they've taught in class. And so I really regret that I was afraid to talk to my professors for so long, because they can be an amazing resource, for learning and knowledge, but later on for things like possibly lab experiences. So if you get to know a professor and you really think their work is cool, it might be possible to volunteer or even get paid work in their lab in the summer. And then you get research experience while still getting, to do something really interesting. And then eventually, if you stay on and want to do an honors project, they can be good people to work for. So I think that's my biggest piece of advice. And I think it applies not just to biology, but to anyone as you're going into university is be brave and talk to your professors, but like, don't waste their time. But if you're interested in what they do, ask them about it and go to their office hours if you have questions about the work. Your TAs or graduate students, they're just very giant nerds about their field too. So go for it. Talk to them.
Awesome. Thank you for that advice, and thank you so much for sharing so much about your research and your education path.
Of course.
Thank you, Alyssa, and best of luck with your future endeavors.
Thank you, and good luck to all of you out there watching, because I know most of you are probably getting close to the end of high school and starting to think about what comes next. So good luck to you too.
Thank you. Okay, now we are going to have a short 10-minute break, but our next hour is going to be with design, technology, and mechatronics engineering. So stay tuned for that. And after that, we are going to have more engineering speakers and a math speaker. So stay tuned and see you soon. Hello, Miss Hoy. I'm just gonna introduce you. I can't hear you.
Oh, hi there.
Now I can hear you. Okay. Hi everyone. This is Tiffany Hoy, and she's an industrial designer interested in food, culture, and interactive technologies. She has a BFA from Rhode Island School of Design, and she aims to share design as a tool for future generations to create more inclusive futures. I know Ms. Hoy personally, and she is super awesome and inspiring, and I'm sure you'll find her that way too. Right. Could you please introduce yourself and your current career?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Miss Hoy, or actually my name is Tiffany Hoy, and I work as a design thinking facilitator at Crofton House School. Would you like me to introduce more about what I do, or more about my studies? Where would you like me to go?
Maybe a bit of both. Your journey.
Both. Yeah, so I guess maybe where I started was in industrial design. And I didn't actually think that I would be studying industrial design. I'd never heard of such a career or such a career title when I was in high school. And originally when I was in high school, I thought I would be a video game designer, because I loved something like that, because I took maybe an architecture class and I loved drawing, and I also loved programming. And so culminating these two things, obviously be a video game designer for some reason. But I think going to a fine art school had let me kind of experiment a little bit with different kind of studies and ways of thinking that I'd never heard of before. I do remember when I was in my first year, you get so the way ISD works is you have a foundation year, and you have a winter session where you get to take a course of your choosing. It's kind of like out of major kind of course. And a lot of students use this opportunity to try to test out a course that they think they might be majoring in. And this course runs for the length of a month, and you take this course every single day, 3 days a week. I took a furniture class, and I made absolutely no furniture. I made household products. I designed things that were kind of small objects, and I was like, maybe industrial design. Thus, entering industrial design in my major, I realized that I was such an awkward duckling, and I had no idea what the rest of the year would entail. So industrial design, for those who don't know, it's commonly associated with the idea of designing mass-produced products. And often that is seen as something as maybe complex as like your iPhone, or maybe something that is like your, I don't know, like your humidifier or some sort of household item or smart objects, things like that. It's a very vast kind of field. And I think what really got me interested was the idea of designing something that was the idea of good design, something that is so ubiquitous with daily life that it enables you to go on with your daily life without having any hassle. Because the things that you do notice in your life are the things, the good things that you do, your interactions with other people, for instance, and say bad design. So maybe like you couldn't open the door because it said push, but you pulled instead or something. So that is an instance of bad design. So I was really attracted to the idea of good design and how it can improve people's lives on a large scale. So I guess moving on from that, there's a little bit of a gap, but after graduation, I did work at some design firm companies where I was designing products, and I felt like I was doing almost a disservice to the world because I felt like I was designing a lot of garbage. So that is something that plagues me to this day. Like you will see me standing there at the compost bin, worried about where something should go, or where like the plastics or whatever, how to sort out your waste properly. But right now, one of the things that I was doing in my final year in my thesis was thinking about how design can be democratized, how can it be accessible, and to create better change for make design truly accessible, thus creating great amount of change. And so somehow this job kind of landed on me, being a design thinking facilitator at Crofton House School. So at this job, what I do is I try to integrate design thinking, design philosophies, design technologies into K-12, the K-12 program at Crofton, through any subject, through any grade. We just do kind of like a collab, or I run events, or I run workshops and things that are sometimes very mildly related to design, and some really, getting students to really dig their feet into design.
Mm-hmm. How were the things you learned in high school applicable to university and your current job?
So, I think, what did I learn in high school? So what I learned in high school, I'm going to change the question that you asked me a little bit. So what I learned in high school was I went to an independent school actually. So I was, kind of like your average high school student, so obsessed with my marks and my, like trying to join every single like club and contest. Like I did all those, I used to do those like format and whatever, those math contests and things. And I feel like that sometimes it kind of brought me away from what I was truly interested in, and maybe finding, I was really intent on trying as many things as possible. And I think that is a really, really good thing. But I think what I really tried to do was I tried to procrastinate by doing more things. So like my excuse for not doing something was because I was busy doing something else. But actually, I think it was just a problem of, trying to figure out how to successfully choose the things and time manage in a certain way that was effective to my personal, mental health and everything combined, trying to balance all these things. In high school, I think there's always that drive to try certain things, try different things. And I think that's something I still carry on to today. I love trying, I still do these hackathons. I've been holding some at Crofton House. I've been helping run these events, and I still go join these events throughout the city and in virtual hackathons that do exist. And I think that kind of collaborative sense is something like working with other people and trying out new ideas and not being afraid of doing that is something that is important that I kept from high school to now.
For sure. Could you describe some of the cool internships you've had?
So I think the one internship that really pops out for me was my internship at Martha Stewart, and that was when I was working in it was like West 34th or something and Starlight Lehigh in New York, Manhattan, and I was like, I made it. It was incredible. It's an incredible city. I think it's bustling, and it's kind of like little. I grew up in Vancouver, so I'd never been to such a big, beautiful, such a busy city at all. Working there, it was an incredible experience because I think I really got into the design process. I think it's a really fast-paced kind of design production firm. So we were producing products that were going to be manufactured by Macy's, and what that entailed was that it was really back and forth with us and Macy's, and you'd be surprised how many people there are in that design team. The whole floor of that high-rise that we were in was full of people doing marketing and her test kitchens and things. She has 3, by the way, and like different. It's like it's a huge media company. Like she does a lot of products and media, and there was like maybe 4 of us in hardware home design. So that was designing kitchen goods, tableware, stuff like that. And we did a lot of stuff that was sometimes festive and sometimes a little more towards just like kitchen gadgets and things.
Nice. Do you have any career goals for the future?
Career goals in the future. So I guess I'd like to pick up where I love what I'm doing right now, in that it's about bringing accessibility of design to youth and younger generations. I'd love to continue that kind of democratizing design in a way that maybe falls more under these two. I just love speculative design and critical design. So speculative design is like looking at far future and thinking about potential problems and finding ways to solve them through design. And critical design is also kind of looking at exactly what we have right now and maybe imagining a scenario that kind of, and proposing some sort of design that kind of challenges these scenarios or these problems, these scenarios that are, kind of with a little bit of what's happening right now, maybe trying to take a far dystopian view of something, but trying to design some part of a solution towards that. So that's super interesting to me. And finding ways to always bring access to design is, I think, maybe going to be a life goal of mine.
Could you talk a bit more about how we can make design more accessible?
Yeah, so I think a lot of times when I work with students in Crofton, I think I often hear students being kind of like stuck on things, or obviously I think we know at Crofton we know what stress is, and I think sometimes there's ways to productively work through stress, but to also acknowledge that there are limits to that. In design, we often look at these limits and try to find ways to use these limits as your strengths. Sorry, your question was to bring better access. So that's a hard question. I think maybe even working towards like some sort of, you know what? Maybe we need to come back on that. Give me 1 second. Bringing better access, I think, comes from giving students opportunities, or for me, it's giving students opportunities to present their findings through design. And I think a lot of students actually do have a lot of design skills. They just don't see them as design skills. And so maybe one of them might be working collaboratively with someone, or listening to, you have a goal and you're trying to be creative, but you are trying to be goal-oriented while being creative. I think this is also a little bit of a side tangent, but I was listening to a podcast and that was talking about creativity and how we often see creativity as an explorative means of doing something. But I think in design, we use creativity in a very direct goal-oriented way, but we switch in between the two and use those two to our advantage.
That's a good answer. What are some of your favorite courses from university?
From university, definitely that furniture class where I got my butt beat, because I think there was a lot of humility I learned. I think coming from a small independent school in Vancouver, you kind of have this I had this false sense of like being a top dog, like you're branded as like the art student. So it's like, you kind of go there and then you end up going to a really, you go to a fine arts school and you find out that everybody else here is, just as intent on learning and just is so good. Like everybody else is also so talented and skilled at art. And also that, we constantly challenge what art is. But going back to just that kind of learning about humility in some ways in that class. I took a course also on, I took a really interesting course on medical devices. I really enjoyed it because it helped me work with, it's just something I didn't realize design could be used for. So I was working on medical devices and thinking about, we were looking at a children's medical dispenser. So thinking about how we can make that experience of taking liquid medicine easier for children. And so the common solution to that right now is a syringe. And I can tell you, as far as I can tell, you can see all across the internet, there's children like kicking and screaming because they do not want to take medication. And obviously there's things that, that is maybe not in my realm, which is like figuring out maybe putting specific like banana flavors or fruit flavors in with cough syrups and things. But there's some certain, like say Buckley's, like you'll never be able to change the flavor of Buckley's, but you will not doubt that Buckley's works. This is not an endorsement, but it's kind of in that sense. So my team, I worked with a couple of pediatricians and nurses, and I had one project partner who's also an industrial designer, and we worked together to design a solution that would incorporate, it was a 2-chamber bottle that would have in one the medication that you put, and into like a juice or maybe just a container where you put juice or water or whatever you want to dilute your solution with. In that way, you can ensure that you have so the problem is if you had like 1 cup and you had maybe your cup of juice and you put the medication in the juice, the problem is if the child doesn't drink all of the juice, you risk not giving the full dosage of of medication to the kid. So by having them in separate chambers, you can ensure that you have given all of the medication in one shot, while kind of reducing that kind of like traumatic experience for the child, because we do really care about, I think, there's a lot of reasons why we do things, like we try to care about things, like, yeah, of course we can use the syringe, and of course the syringe works for some people, but perhaps if we design for a very specific subset of people who are really having trouble with this one task, with this one thing that they're trying to do in daily life, if you can make that easier for that one person, you can make it easier for everybody else. Everybody benefits from it.
Do you have any advice for anyone hoping to enter design?
Sure. So there's many different fields within design. Design's just a huge, giant cloud of things. I think something that I really find important is maybe drawing, and drawing is not about being good at drawing, but for me, drawing is a way to help visualize an idea. So often we'll say, a simple solution is, a simple solution for solving that baby medicine or like child medicine dispenser is a syringe, but a syringe can exist itself in so many different ways, and there's so many little details in which it can exist. And I think trying to find a way, it doesn't have to be drawing. It could be maybe you're using text-to-speech kind of technologies, or maybe you're writing, you're doodling, or you're drawing. You have to find some way to help communicate, visualize, and communicate your ideas. I think that's a really important skill to have. Another thing is to learn to work with people, because in nothing that you do will ever be done. I don't think anything that you're going to be doing is going to be done alone. I think there's a lot of collaborative work that is really, really important. And I think when I'm working with students at Crofton, with younger students, it's really amazing seeing the change of that collaborative play that becomes more independent work, because you're kind of starting to hand in work. And then it goes back to we kind of bringing more collaborative work into there. And sometimes we run into little trickies, I guess, just because it's something that is, we just have to introduce that as a thing that is normal, working with other people.
Thank you so much for that advice and for sharing all your cool things you've done. And that's
Thanks, Maia.
the end of our time. So thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Our next speaker is Shannon Halliday. She has been working in clean and green technology for the past 18 years as a leader, creator, and entrepreneur. She currently works for the government of Quebec to develop partnerships for companies in Western Canada. I'm really excited to hear about her environmental work. Hello, Shannon.
Hi, Maia.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I have just kicked my family out of the house.
Nice.
Yes, I'm like, please be quiet.
That is a hard thing to manage right now.
Yes, one of the challenges of everybody being at home.
Yeah. So could you please introduce yourself and your current career?
So, as you said, my name's Shannon, and I currently work for the government of Quebec as a commercial attaché, which means a trade officer. So basically it means I'm a professional matchmaker, helping companies from Quebec do business in west of Quebec. So that includes the territories, Ontario, BC, Alberta. And I predominantly work in clean tech and renewables. And I opened the office for them in July of 2018 in Vancouver.
How did you get to where you are now?
So it's been a bit of a journey. I didn't take the most direct path to this career. I went to UBC and I did an arts program. And at the time, I had wanted to be a trade commissioner. So basically what I'm doing now is what I wanted to do when I went to university. And then I studied political science and international relations, a lot on conflict studies and how water scarcity would lead to international conflict. Got very involved in United Nations, Model United Nations. And then I ended up, so I completed my degree. Oh, I also belonged to the International Relations Student Association at UBC. I found one of the great things about going to UBC was all the different clubs they had and your exposure to so many different people doing so many different things and from so many different places. That was just such a cool thing for me to be part of. When I left UBC, I ended up moving to Europe. I went backpacking for 2 months, and I came home 7 years later. So my 7 years in Geneva was a combination of, I was actually 1 year in Paris and then 6 years in Geneva, and I alternated those 7 years and basically my time in my 20s between having a lot of fun and then doing something which I felt was, going to be more serious or to in service of humanity, so to speak. And so I eventually did an internship at the United Nations in early on in my 20s. I had applied for the UN Environment Program in Nairobi. They rejected me because I didn't have a master's at the time, but I ended up getting accepted into the UN Center for Human Rights internship program in Geneva. So that's what made me move to Geneva. And eventually I did my MBA there and did my MBA thesis with WWF. And so that got me WWF International, the wildlife people, not the wrestlers. And and that got me back into my connection with nature and wanting to, be of service, but especially be of service in helping make the planet a healthier place. And eventually I moved home and I moved home to Vancouver, and I started talking to people and said, okay, I'm a tree hugger that likes technology. What do you suggest? And at that time, fuel cells and hydrogen was really going crazy in Vancouver. And so I started a massive networking campaign and met a ton of people and eventually got a job, my first sort of professional post-MBA job in Vancouver. I'd done professional jobs in finance in Geneva, but I'd never had a quote unquote grown-up job in Vancouver. And so there I was back in Vancouver, actually at UBC, at the National Research Council for my first job. And I was a project manager for a fuel cell powered wheelchair. And so now I was on campus again, just where the National Research Council building is, but I wasn't in any part of campus that I ever went to except for parties. So I was always in the engineering wings now and the chemical engineering buildings, and it was quite a shift. And then after that, I started getting introducing a lot more renewables into the work I was doing. I started working eventually for Natural Resources Canada as a one-person office for their hydrogen transportation energy group. And I ended up still doing a lot of hydrogen, but as I said, started working into more renewables and got on a really neat, interesting working group with the International Energy Agency, looking at hydrogen projects around the world, mostly with a renewable energy component. And so the picture I have on my profile is one of those site visits that we did in the Canary Islands. And so I got exposed there to tons of different renewable technologies and how they could be paired with hydrogen storage and such. And then I got exposed to more work that needed to be done around remote communities and distributed power. And I was really inspired by helping remote communities get off diesel. And I saw that the hydrogen world at the time was funding and such was decreasing. And so I made a move over to Power Tech Labs, which is a subsidiary of BC Hydro, and started working in their distributed power group and doing a lot more kind of small scale renewables. From there, I moved to the private sector into a tidal energy company and did a lot of project development through the US and into Europe about launching tidal projects and inland power projects. And then here I am at the government of Quebec, and I do a lot of work in the wind industry, helping wind service companies develop partnerships with other large players in Canada and developing opportunities for companies in this industry for our projects that are happening around Canada.
What does your typical day on the job look like?
So as a trade commissioner, your day is always it's always quite different, and especially now, there is a lot of time on the phone, and you're exposed to a lot of different companies. So the other day, I just had a really interesting call with a company that builds electric buses and electric garbage trucks, and they're looking at further developing their market across Canada. So you chat with them about what they want to do and how you can help them. There's team chats. There's market studies. There's often there will be incoming delegations of companies, and you need to figure out who are the best people for them to meet. Or I'll identify people who might be interested in buying the services of these wind companies, for example, or wind service companies, and I'll bring them to Gaspé to visit the suppliers and see if there can be a relationship there. So a lot of different things, a lot of matchmaking, and all my jobs have been quite different. There's a lot of 9-to-5 office work, but then there's the times where you can get out of the office and do site visits or conferences and get a chance to really expand your knowledge of all these different things. So every different job had different things that were really, really interesting. And I helped develop a renewable energy study for the country of Brunei. And so I got to go to Brunei and meet with various government officials and put together a project team that would be able to deliver, based on what resources they had in the country, would be delivered the best recommendations for how they should move forward. And so there's been lots of really cool moments throughout my career, but they've all been very different.
Wow. What do you think that the future of renewable energy will look like?
Well, I tend to be on the positive side and optimistic side, but right now I really feel like there's some huge potential for renewables. The prices have finally come down, and that wind and solar are a lot of the times the cheaper options now because the prices have fallen so much. So it's often a no-brainer to be using these technologies. Now I hope that we'll be seeing a lot more distributed power, and because so much of this stuff is so reliable now in remote communities. And so I think just depends on what your resource is in your community or country or area where you live, what the renewable option looks like. But I definitely, from all the market studies I've read, even recently, it shows that there's some huge opportunities for growth here.
For sure. What are some of the courses that you took in university that really helped you with your job today?
Well, my job today is a lot less technical than my previous jobs. So this job, I find probably this job is a lot of networking, I suppose. I'm just trying to think of the different classes. I mean, it was more, university for me was more learning all these different subject areas and seeing what I could get excited about. And also, especially during the MBA and especially during my last year of university, it's a lot about survival. You've got so much work being thrown at you that you prove to yourself that you can do hard things as Glennon Doyle says, this author that all women should check out, and also that there's just, you learn a certain style of work ethic through being exposed to, through going through university, and particularly in a master's program. And so I'm thinking, there wasn't really any one course. There were sort of themes that I loved. I loved learning about the conflict studies around water and environmental scarcity. I loved my professor on South Asian studies. I loved a lot of the international market work and leadership work that I did. This is some of the times I really regretted that I didn't have a stronger technical background or a technical undergrad, because I found that engineers tend to whiz through MBAs because their math skills are so strong. And so I found some of those classes challenging, but at the same time, it was good to prove to myself that I can understand these things and I can do it. I couldn't give up. That's not an option.
What challenges are the environmental sector currently facing?
Well, especially right now is with a lack of, all of a sudden there's a lack of capital investment, because people want to be holding on to their money in times like this. In general, before the COVID situation hit, one of the big problems was energy storage. That I feel is getting solved through various battery storage and hydrogen storage technologies, including different water technologies. So I think that is going to be solved in the future, in the near future, and for in many cases it has been. I think it's willingness to realize that, yes, these can be solutions. We've been very spoiled with oil and gas, and there's that's sort of one solution that everybody's had to use. And now people need to think, well, what's the best solution for where I am? And it may not be wind, and it may not be, it may be hydrogen, like looking at some, hydrogen created by some renewable. It just depends on where you're living and what resource you have. But it's hard for people to wrap their head around maybe not having oil and gas meet all their energy needs.
How does Quebec and the other provinces mutually benefit from each other?
Well, there's a lot of trade potential, and there is a lot of trade that actually happens between the provinces. And it's very, Quebec and BC especially, I find very culturally similar in the fact that I listened to a great presentation by someone from ARC, a company based in Alberta, and I can't remember his name at the moment. But he talks about how different provinces are based on the energy the resources that are below their feet. And so there's a lot of similarities between provinces that have strong hydro below their feet and then oil and gas resources. So that's just on that side. There's a lot of opportunities to trade between the provinces, and companies often don't look at provincial trade because the market is not as big, and so people will look to the US because the market is bigger, and want to go directly there, and kind of not realizing that there often is an opportunity in Canada. And for other companies, if you could buy a Canadian product, then why not? Why look internationally, especially if you can find a Canadian product? This is something we've seen for sure with the electric buses and garbage trucks and such.
What do you think that the biggest innovation coming our way will be in the sector?
I think there's lots of, well, storage is definitely going to be one. I think hydrogen is going to get more involved. I think we will see, like I said, with storage, we'll see battery technology continuing. There's some really neat things going on with carbon capture. There's the company in Squamish that does carbon capture, which is super cool. There's, if General Fusion, the company based here in Burnaby, they've had some successes, and so there's a number of things that are on the radar that could be really cool. I think that the message is there's a number of things that are out there.
For sure. And do you have any advice for someone hoping to enter this industry?
Well, the one advice I'd have for, just anybody in later on in high school is some people are very passionate, know what they want to do, and that's great. And other people are kind of like me, and you have many different experiences. And I used to think, well, I need to be really passionate about one thing and dedicate my life to this one thing. And I read this article by Elizabeth Gilbert, and she said she's the woman who wrote Eat, Pray, Love. And she said that the most important thing she felt is to follow your curiosity. And that people who follow their curiosity, they're like hummingbirds, and they manage to pollinate all these different areas based on their different experiences. So I think, your 20s is the time to figure things out, to try things, to get lost, get found, do internships. I had no idea that there was so many internships out there. Internships just seemed like the best way to test drive opportunities. And the number one thing is just believe in yourself. You are your number one supporter. And if I could have told myself that in my 20s, life would have been just so much easier, and not having a certain amount of doubt, but not being so doubtful, and just really believing in yourself.
Thank you so much, Shannon, for talking with us and sharing that really good advice. Have a
Thank
great
you, Maya.
day. Bye. We are just waiting on our next speaker, so I'm just going to find out where she is. But continue to ask questions in the chat, and they're being sent to me, and I will try my best to have them all answered from the speakers themselves. Hello. Sumreen Rattan is the founder of Moment Technology, Inc., a startup striving to provide access to renewable and reliable power storage by repurposing electric vehicle batteries. She studied Mechatronic Systems Engineering at Simon Fraser University and has completed an eight-month internship at Apple. She is also one of Canada's 2020 Next 36 founders, so we have lots to learn from her. Hi, Sumreen, can you hear me?
Hi, Maya. Yes, I can hear you.
Could you?
Sorry, I'm from two different devices. Can you see my video?
Yeah, I can see you.
Okay, awesome.
You're good. Could you please introduce yourself and a bit about what you do now?
Sure, yeah. So, as you mentioned, my name's Sumreen. I'm a mechatronic systems engineer. I went to Simon Fraser University, and I'm actually still working out of Simon Fraser University because I along with engineering, I also took advantage of their entrepreneurship program. So I'm working they have an incubator called Venture Connection, and I'm working on Moment there, as you mentioned, where we're creating sustainable energy storage from electric vehicle batteries. So I thought actually it's interesting because this ties directly into what Shannon was mentioning about energy storage.
Yeah.
I'm working in that sector.
Yeah. How did you get to where you are now?
So it's been it's been a journey of, I'd say, 5 years of engineering. In my final year of engineering, I did a 8-month, all engineers have to do an 8-month capstone project. So that's kind of where I got introduced to entrepreneurship. I was a part of the technology entrepreneurship program at SFU. And I started we were actually working on a mental health startup at the time. And then we eventually transitioned into, we pivoted into what we're doing now, which is energy storage and sustainable technologies. So it's been quite a journey in that sense. It took a lot of thinking and understanding where I'm with a team of 4 other, it's 4 of us, 3 other engineers. So we had to decide, it was a hard pivot to move away from mental health because that means a lot to us too. But at the end of the day, the electric vehicle space, it's something that my team and I have been working on over the past 3 years. We co-founded this design team at SFU. It's called Team Phantom. So over there, we're building an electric race car from scratch. And that's where we first got involved with clean tech. And we decided that this is a natural progression for us to do that in the long run as well for a startup.
Wow. So what are some of the roles that each of you play on the startup?
Right now, the 4 of us, we don't have official titles yet. We're all founders. We'll probably get to that soon, but I've been working more on the business side. So I do the technical work as well, but I've been trying to learn more about the entrepreneurial skills that you need to start a company. So I've been doing a lot of what we call customer discovery. So that means reaching out to different people, figuring out who is going to be the one who's going to buy our product we're building, and then also establishing relationships with different companies on the supply side. So it's a lot of learning.
And could you describe your product and what you're working towards?
Sure, yeah. So our product it's a battery storage unit. So originally, actually, we were planning on selling our unit to power outdoor events, because currently a lot of events rely on diesel power, and we want to introduce a product that they can use that weans away from diesel and fossil fuels and instead uses clean technology. So our unit's made out of electric vehicle batteries. And what that means is usually when an electric vehicle batteries are retired from an electric car. So let's say I own a Tesla and it's been over 10 years and now that battery is no longer useful for the car. So that battery still has up to 80% of its capacity left. So instead of throwing that away or recycling it too early, we see an opportunity where we can take those batteries and use it for a less intense application. So we want to be able to pair it with renewable technology, so we can use the same batteries from the car to store solar power or wind power or anything sustainable.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are there any big obstacles that prevent this from becoming more accessible to more people?
So right now, I would say currently on the supply side, the supply is not super high in Canada. So we definitely need to leverage the North American, so the United States as well, because there's a lot more electric vehicles over there. So currently the supply is a little bit low, but we do see that increasing over the next decade or so. There's going to be hundreds of millions of electric vehicles on the road. So I would say waiting for the supply to increase is one of the obstacles that we're facing. And then on the other hand, it would be the event space. So actually, due to COVID, a lot of the events that we were going to be partnering with, they've been canceled. Mm-hmm. So we're finding another customer. So doing that whole process is another obstacle.
For sure. What does your typical day look like when you have events going on?
So right now we're still in the prototype phase. So what we were going to be iterating on our product with the different events. So it's a little bit challenging. So the 4 of us are working from home. So one of the prototypes is sitting at one member's house, and then the rest of us we have our home set up with the video calls every day, and we're constantly reaching out to people and having meetings. So I've been cold contacting, which means like just reaching out to people over LinkedIn or calling different companies, trying to understand more of like what their needs are. So yeah, that's what my day looks like currently, and also a lot of research. So we want to be able to be experts in this field, and there's a lot of learning to do because the four of us are fresh graduates. So there's a lot more to learn.
Speaking of learning, could you please describe some of the courses you took in university?
Yeah, definitely. So the Mechatronics program, it's pretty diverse because it's a combination of 3 different types of engineering. So that's electrical, mechanical, and software. So you can honestly go. There's so many different applications or different fields you can go into with our engineering program. So I've taken courses like robotics courses, which helped me. And 2 of my internships were actually robotics based. And then I also took a few biomedical engineering courses. So that was pretty interesting. And then there's the sustainable energy side as well, I've taken some courses to do with the power electronics and how to use solar energy and wind energy. So there's a lot of different things you can do. There's also purely like design courses that we take, which is includes mechanical design. So let's say the person that's designing the frame of the next iPhone, that's something a mechanical engineer would be doing.
We have a question from one of our audience members, and it's, what are some of the challenges you've come across and how did you overcome them?
The challenges. I would say during my program, one of the biggest challenges was actually mental health related for me. So I've been an overthinker my entire life, but it wasn't fully impacting my entire life until university hit, and I think it was third or fourth year, taking 5 or 6 courses a semester, and then on top of that there was a few struggles at home. So all those things piled on, and then the overthinking on top of it, it really gets to you. So I had to learn how to face my mental health, or actually to cope with it. So this included things like self-care. So whether that's taking a bath, reading a book, hanging out with friends, playing sports, like you have to find a balance. So I learned that along the way, and I would say that was probably the biggest struggle for me. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. And of course you had an internship at Apple. Could you please describe what that was like?
Definitely, yeah. Maybe I could even share my screen. I have a picture of, hold on a second. Screen 1. Okay. Yeah, so you can see here. Did it open?
Yeah.
There you go. So this is actually a combination of pictures from my internship at Apple, because this is in California. So it was my first time moving away from home. I was there for 8 months. It was an incredible experience. So this is just showing some of the fun side of like you meet a lot of other interns there. There's actually a lot of Canadians there as well. So we end up exploring the scenery in California, and this is the weekend fun. And then during the week, so at work, I was actually doing robotics at Apple, so that we were testing different features on the iPad and iPhone, including the AR kit. So what that is if you imagine, I don't know if you played Pokemon Go before.
Yeah, I have.
Where you point your phone at like a surface, and then all of a sudden there's a Pokemon on there. So that's what they call AR kit. So augmented reality. We were testing the features for that, so I got to program a robotic arm. I got to create my own robot that would move around different floors and test the phone as well. So that was a lot of fun for me.
Wow, awesome. So that was probably one of the best parts of your undergraduate degree, but one of the audience members is also wondering, what are some more of your favorite parts of your undergrad?
Sure. I would say, so on the technical side, Team Phantom has been an incredible experience. I think you might have this question later on, but I'll address it now. But if there's a piece of advice I could give to incoming students, university students, it would be join a design team. So whether that's, we have like a satellite team, a rocketry team, aerospace, and Team Tim is the electric race team. So like it's actually an invaluable experience because you learn so many hands-on skills that you might not learn in the classroom. In my case, it was learning how to design circuit boards, doing some low-level programming, so all those things, and then also just understanding like how to, because a Team Phantom's almost like a company in a way, because it's an entire team of over 40 members trying to build an electric car. So there's a lot of different things that go into that. So whether you want to end up being a project manager at the end of the day or a mechanical designer, that's all things you can learn in a design team. So yeah, that was a really great experience. And then something non-technical is that I was part of SFU's Bollywood dance team. I founded that with a few of my friends, and I'm still a part of it. So dancing has been a great experience. Going out and meeting new people on campus, it's been a lot of fun too.
Nice. And
Yeah.
in terms of the future, what kinds of career goals do you have?
So currently I would say it's becoming a successful entrepreneur is definitely at the top of my list. So I'm actually continuing to work on my startup outside of university. So I want to be able to see that scale, and yeah, see the company do well, and eventually. So we actually want to be able to transition remote communities off of diesel. That's a long-term vision.
Yeah, and that's just what Shannon was talking about too.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any products that you think would be prototyped in the future?
Products, so for at moment at the company?
Or things that you're interested in.
Or other things that I've done. Products to be prototyped for the future. So at the moment it would be the actual like our battery units. That's going to be something that we're going to be figuring out. Like we need to once we figure out our exact customer. So whether that's if it's a remote community, we need to build a huge battery station to be able to power the community. So that's on the list. In terms of other stuff, I'm not too sure about other things that would be prototyped. Maybe something that might be a little fun. Maybe someone listening could tackle. It's a few of us have done a balancing robot project. So that means that it's like an inverted pendulum. So you can't really see my finger here, but you build a mini robot, and then it gets to travel back and forth, and you program it to stay stable. So maybe I try a mini project like that just for fun.
Awesome. And what is Vancouver like for a startup?
Vancouver, it's been pretty interesting to see a lot of the entrepreneurship stuff happening here. We do have a lot of events that happen in Vancouver. I actually just attended an event called Pitch for the Purse, and that's a entrepreneurship event for female founders. So they call it Pitch for the Purse for that reason. Different female founders come up and they present their company, and then they're pitching for a grand prize. So that's actually like a really great thing to see. It was a great thing for me to see, and it was really inspiring. And that happened just a couple months ago. And we have SFU, UBC also. We have our own entrepreneurship programs here. And I want to say there's also a few external things. Like there's a platform called Volition, which is where the Volition has a bunch of mentors that you can contact, and they're basically experts in entrepreneurship. And then they also host pitching nights. So they have pitching nights specifically for women, and they have pitching nights for the general public. So that's also a great place to go and network and meet other entrepreneurs. There's actually a lot of stuff going on here if you try and find it. Yeah.
And one final question from the audience is, could you explain briefly what entrepreneurship really is?
Sure, okay. Entrepreneurship. I think I might get this quote a little wrong, but my mentor likes to say that entrepreneurship is like entering a dark room with a tiny flashlight and slowly lighting up different parts of the room, and eventually that flashlight gets bigger and bigger. So that's I feel that's a good explanation of what it's like, because you go into entrepreneurship, and at the start, this is what I'm working on right now, is a bit of our second startup, you could say. But in both instances, our first startup on mental health and our second one, we were really excited. The first couple of weeks was so exciting, and then eventually you hit a wall and you're like, wow, there's so many things I don't know. So it's a lot of like pointing the flashlight around and trying to fill the light in the room and understanding what's going on. You end up being where we say a lot of people become entrepreneurs to be their own bosses, and it really is that, because you have to hold yourself accountable. You're in charge of all the learning. I could describe it with so many more words, but I would say the dark room with the flashlight is probably the best example.
It is really effective. Thank you so much, Sumreen, for speaking with me today and for providing the Zoom link for all the speakers.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thank you so much for having me, Maya.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. All right. We will be back in a short 10-minute break again, but Sumreen will be able to answer your questions on the chat or through her LinkedIn, which we will link later below in the description box. Thank you so much for staying and supporting us, and I'll see you after the break for two more engineer speakers, actually three, because two of them are co-workers. So we have Anna and Jessica, who are civil engineers and build bridges. We have Martina, who is a civil engineer as well, but she builds tunnels. And last but not least, we'll be hearing from Alexa, who has her own Girls to the Power of Math organization. Okay, see you in 10 minutes. All right. All right. Welcome back, everyone, and we're here today, right now, with two bridge engineers. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Anna. I'm just going to introduce you and Jess for a short bit. Anna Lemaire studied civil engineering and construction in France and in Montreal, and now works at COWI North America in Vancouver. Her co-worker, Jessica Ng, is a bridge designer who has a Master's of Structural Engineering from the University of Toronto. So let's learn a bit about the fantastic projects that these two have worked on. All right, could you both please introduce your current careers and a bit about yourself as well?
Maybe I can start. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I am from France originally. I studied in France and in Montreal in construction and civil engineering. And I started working here in Vancouver 5 or 6 years ago. And I've changed company once. I've started working for 2 years in one company, and then I went to a bridge engineering company, a bit more specialized, last 4 or 5 years, I guess. Actually 3, anyway, something like that.
Jess, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sorry, I just got my microphone working.
Oh, good, no worries.
Hi, I'm Jessica Ng. I'm a bridge designer with COWI North America. yeah, I've been working at COE for about 2.5 years, basically right after I finished my master's. So I'm really happy to be doing this today.
Awesome. How did the both of you get to where you are now? And have you always wanted to enter engineering?
I didn't always necessarily know that I wanted to be in engineering, but I've always had an interest in structures and in math and science. So I think it was kind of a very natural career path for me. For I think most engineering schools in Canada, they at least give you the option of starting in general engineering, and you don't specialize into like the major disciplines, which in my case was civil, until kind of later on, maybe in second year. And then you can specialize further as you kind of move through your university education. So in my case, I wasn't officially able to specialize into structural until I did my master's, but did try to follow my interest and chose to take as many structural courses in undergrad, as many as I could. And then, yeah, the things that I learned in school are very applicable to my current position. In fact, kind of just this week, I was working on designing a bridge column, and I was referring to some of the notes that I took in university, in undergrad. So very helpful.
For me, sorry, what was the question again?
Have you always been interested in your current career?
All right. Yes. I've always wanted to be an engineer. Always loved to solve issues. Problems actually. Working with construction, building things. I was always attracted to documentary, and similarly to Jessica, I went to school for engineering. It was a broader topic at the beginning, and as I went on my education, I started to specialize into structure, and then as I was working, I decided to go to bridge engineering. Yeah.
What does your typical day look like?
Oh, I guess I can start with that one. A typical day will be working 8 to 5. It's fairly flexible depending on the companies. They have different flexibility for the hours sometimes, but most of us would do both field work and in the office. I actually can share my desk here. I have a couple of slides showing what we do on a typical day if you like to see that basically. Let me know if it works.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've just pulled up a few photos if you can see it.
Yeah.
That's just pictures of our typical project. So I just went on site to check out the girders, the steel that was manufactured, to see that it was as per our design. But to be honest, most of our time we spend behind a computer doing some analysis. So that's bridge analysis. We're using a software to determine demands on different members. And we spend a lot of time doing calculation using Excel, just like you do at school. A lot of time doing that behind the screen, and sometimes writing reports and eventually preparing drawings. So that's a few examples of a typical section of a bridge that we work with. And yeah, and that's basically what we need to produce. Yeah.
Nice. Could you describe some of the people that you work with who aren't bridge engineers?
Oh, good question. Jessica, you want to answer that?
Yeah, sure. Definitely within COE, within the company, we work with some other engineers as well. We sometimes work with, we have some in-house like geotechnical people. So we interact with them a lot. They help with a lot of the soil stuff that we're a little bit less familiar with. We have some knowledge of it, but they're, know more about it. And then we also work with, they're called project support within our company, and they help with a lot more of like the management of the project. So most of the time, engineers focus on a lot of like the technical stuff. So like calculations, the analysis. But then we have project support who they help kind of run a little bit more like the administrative stuff. So kind of communicating with people outside of the company, or if there's kind of paperwork that always needs to get filled out, like they'll support us with that.
Like invoicing, project tracking, and things like that.
Yeah, and like tracking budgets and that sort of thing.
What are some of the bridges that you have worked on, and where are they?
There's just one group of people that I think Jessica missed to include. It's the drafters. We work a lot. There's a lot of interaction with drafters who produce drawings, and we have to go back and forth and transfer an idea on a paper, on a sketch. Can sometimes be a bit challenging. So that's a lot of coordination there when we have to produce drawings, which is not always the case. Sometimes it's only reports, but yeah.
In terms of the projects that I've worked on, I've worked on the big ones were there was a bridge in New York. It's called the George Washington Bridge. It's actually, I believe it's the busiest vehicle bridge in the world. So I worked on kind of a rehabilitation repairs project for that for about a year and a half. I worked on a bid design. So that means before we've actually been awarded the contract, we have to do some preliminary designs so we can tell the client how much we think it's going to cost to build. I worked on a project down in Seattle where there's maybe 14 bridges that either needed to be rebuilt or widened or just brand new bridges. I worked on that as well. And then currently I'm working on a bridge in the BC interior. I can't talk about that too much, but it's a new bridge, and it's really cool for me to be able to be involved in it kind of from nothing. And then I'll be kind of on the project until the end of detailed design, which is when we have the drawings that we can give to a contractor and say, this is a design, here's how you build it.
Nice. Anna, do you have any projects you'd like to talk about?
I can talk at high level. I've been working on bigger projects. For instance, the new Champlain Bridge in Montreal, which is a big major project. When you work on this type of project, you have a very small task. So you're like doing one connection on one specific element of the bridge. And it's a very long project with a lot of iterations and things like that. And more recently, I've been working on smaller projects. It means that the tasks are very more diverse. So it's a shorter span and it's less complicated in a sense. But then you get to do much more things. Like, first of all, from concept to construction, it's shorter. So you get to you get to see it being built, and you end up doing more things like design, but as well as like you design from the superstructure to the very bottom to the substructure instead of being only detailing one element and things like that. So that's the type of project that we work on can be very, 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 very different. Yeah.
We have some questions in the audience. So what made you choose civil engineering over the other engineering types?
For me personally, I like being able to see what I'm designing and picture it. For example, some of the other engineering disciplines like electrical or chemical, I think requires it's just harder to visually like look at what you're designing or see what you're designing and how it works. So that's mostly why I chose civil. And like I said before, I've always been interested in structures, so that's a natural path.
Do you get a lot of freedom in your designs, or are there usually very strict requirements for them?
I think it depends on the project. I think basically everything, you just need to be able to justify everything, right? From usually, oftentimes it's a cost perspective. So yes, freedom, you have freedom to be creative and to suggest, maybe non-conventional things, but you just have to back up the reasons behind it, you know?
I would say also depending on the client, so who owns the bridge and who wants the project. If it's a public entity, you will have much more regulations and standards, and you end up having to fit something that they have used on another project, and it's much more restricted. Sometimes when you work on other projects for private companies, you have a bit more flexibility, and they're also able to take a bit more risk in terms of how you design and how you build it. So that may change the condition of the design. And as well, when you work on pedestrian bridge or bridge that are notified as a landmark for a city, then you have more room to do something new, aesthetically more pleasant for the people to look at it. And on the other hand, that can mean that sometimes you also have an architect on board that has much more rules in terms of how it's supposed to look like. So sometimes you are actually more restricted because the architects say you have to make it this way. And then you have less room to play with where you want to put your columns or the shape of your column to make it more efficient. So yeah, it really depends on the project.
Could you describe a bit of the general process of creating the design from scratch?
Do you want to go with it, Jessica?
I guess when we say from scratch, it's not completely from scratch. A lot of times, what you start with is what's been done before, right? So you find kind of a past project usually that was kind of similar, similar span arrangement, so length, similar number of like columns that's required, and you kind of start there, and then you kind of you start adjusting it based on your project's kind of parameters.
And you also have a lot of things that are influenced by other field of expertise, like the geotechnical engineer will tell you, you probably want to put on 2 piers there because you have to use that type of foundation and it's going to be very expensive. So you want to have less foundation work, even though you have to have a longer span or not. It really depends on the site quite often.
Mm-hmm. And not just on the geotechnical. A lot of times there's a lot of other people who have input, right? So there's the roadway people who have to make sure it ties in with the roadways that on either side of the bridge. If it's going over water, you have to coordinate with kind of the marine authority and the environmental authority.
If you go over rails, you have to coordinate with a rail authority.
Right, yeah. And then of course, if it's going through or in or near a city or a town, you have to work with the government to make sure that they're happy with it as well.
Yeah, so before you can come with a design, you really have to understand what are their limits, what are their requirements in terms of the site. And then once you clear that out, you can start looking at the past projects, just like Jessica explained, what the span length is, if you have any depth limitation for the structure, and you go from there with what you've done before.
A few more questions from the audience. Do you have freedom in choosing the contractor, or does your client choose?
A good question. I guess I can start answering that one. It depends on the type of contract. If you design it and then you give it to the client so that they tender it and then come with their own contractor, and then both entities are working for the client, or most of the time when they are bigger projects, then you team up. So the contractor and the designer will team together to provide the project to the client. These type of contracts are used to reduce the risk on the owner side, and it means that also there's more collaboration at the early stage of the project between designer and contractor, so between designing and means of constructing it. I don't know if Jessica, you want to add something?
No, I think you covered it.
What is your favorite part of the whole process? designing or constructing, contracting?
Do you want to answer, Jessica? If you like.
Yeah, I don't know if there's one specific part of it that I like. I just like the problem solving aspect to it. I think that's where you learn the most, and that's where you find the most interesting stuff. Is that just for example, what we were talking about earlier, where you have to coordinate all these stakeholders have all these constraints that they put on you, and then I think it's just very cool and satisfying when you apply your skills to find a solution that works for everybody.
I'd like to add to that. Personally, I also like the fact that we can see a project at the end, we can see being built. It's a very concrete work at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And as we're solving problems, it's actually very great to where we work. So we work for COE. It's a company that is all over North America. We have different offices, and in Denmark, the head office is in Denmark. And we are part of a team that is very engaged and has a lot of passion. And it means that any project that you work on, you always have someone to support you and to answer your question, and that everybody is helping for you to learn on a project. And being part of a good team makes a big difference.
Around how many architects work on each project?
How many?
Architects?
I think there's only one project that comes to my mind that I worked on where we had architectural requirements. So for the new Champlain Bridge, there were design drawings prepared by they don't call them design, but geometrical drawings. So the shape of the bridge were clearly defined, and we had to follow that. That's the only times. But I've only been working on a few projects because you have to keep in mind that new design also a very small portion of our work. We also do a lot of rehabilitation and load rating of existing structure and inspections. So new design is only one part of it. So over the 5 years of work I've been through, there's only a few new design that I've worked on. I don't know if, Jessica, you have more experience working with architects?
No, I've actually had no experience working with any architects. I think it's you bridge engineers work with. This is from my experience. I think we work with architects less than you might think. One thing I really like is I've heard some kind of very well-known bridge engineers talk about how form fits function. So a lot of times on not just bridges, any type of structure, the most efficient structure is also, it just also happens to be the most architecturally pleasing. So a lot of times, even without an architect, the best structure for the situation is also very beautiful. So,
as women in this field, do you feel that there are any challenges specific to that, and how have you overcome these?
Challenging specific to?
Being a woman in engineering.
Do you want to start, Jessica?
Sure. Well, I would just say that I personally, working for COE, I haven't run into any issues with, any sexism or anything. I feel like everybody is very, very well respected for their abilities and their skills. So that's a really great thing about COE. I know it kind of depends on what part of like the consulting work you're doing. The office work, I think, tends to go in that direction where there seems to be a little bit less of that as an issue. But but maybe if you're working with a contractor, that I've heard can sometimes be a challenge, just because it tends to be, there tends to be more men in that field.
Yeah, I also have no specific challenge related to my gender. I feel like most of the challenges are coming from the level of experience. Like the hardest, we talked about this with Jessica prior to this meeting, and we found that the biggest challenge for both of us was to get the first job, because we were lacking hands-on experience. Like if we had to do anything else different from what we've done, we would probably have tried to focus a bit more on internships to get more experience there. But it is not something that's specific to the fact that we are female engineer. I think this is something that relates to anyone. And I think that's the main thing. I've been attending different meetings specific about women on the field. I've heard that some have faced challenges. However, I've heard also that things are evolving, and what happened years ago will not happen anymore, because a lot of managers are now being trained on making sure that these things don't happen anymore. And as it's being implemented, things are getting definitely better than what it used to be. I'm not talking about my personal experience. It's just what I feel from what I've heard from others,
Mm-hmm. That's good to hear. And one of the audience members is curious about the landscapes that you build on. So what is the hardest landscape to work with, and do you have any preferred landscapes? As well, do you have to visit the site in person usually before you start on the project?
Good question.
Yeah.
Maybe I can start quickly. I don't have much experience. I've never been on site before a project, but it's also because the people who are working on conceptual level of people with more experience, who have done more work, and so they are the people who usually start the project, go on site and have a good idea. And once they develop the concept, then they give it to less experienced people to detail it and run a few numbers. And that's how we build up our catalog of experience. So I haven't myself. Now the more complex landscape that I know of for me is working in urban environment. So it's just with roads everywhere, resident houses and buildings, and actually businesses all around, because you don't want to impact traffic, you don't want to impact the business, you don't want to force them to close, you want to make sure buildings have access to their parking lot, and while you have to work on the bridge. So that is for me the most challenging part of it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that was one of the more challenging ones, where we were, that project I was mentioning down near Seattle, we had to put bridges over an existing highway, one of their interstate highways, so a huge highway, and there's development on either sides of it, and you have to kind of squeeze in a bridge somewhere in between there, and then you have to keep the highway open, of course, during construction, so that puts another constraint on there. So I think, actually urban environment is one of the most challenging. And then I think the other thing is it just depends on the soil conditions underneath. It makes a huge difference if it's very soft, very weak soil, or if it's in an area that's prone to huge earthquake effects. Then those I think that kind of environment is also very challenging.
Any exciting things to look forward to in the future?
Always. more work, more opportunities, getting more diverse in what we do. Actually, the different career aspirations as well. I think Jessica, if you want to talk about what you'd like to focus on more.
Yeah. So I'm still pretty early in my career, so I still have a lot to learn. But I think at COE, there's kind of two kind of career paths that you generally can pursue. One's like a technical path, and one's a more of a project management path. I think I'm still, trying to sort this out, but I think I want to pursue a technical specialty path, which, so bridge engineering is already very specialized, but within it, you can also specialize in like specific areas, such as different types of materials or building or running computer analysis models or, earthquakes. And so there's the opportunity at COE for people to become and have the title of technical specialist, which means you're kind of recognized across the company and outside the company as such, and you have such a deep well of knowledge that can be used as a resource by people in offices all over the world. And so I think that's a career path I want to take, and I'm excited to find what topic I'm interested in and to see what I can learn.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for taking the time to speak with me today. And I learned a lot about building bridges, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Thanks
for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a good day.
You too.
Thanks, you too.
Bye.
Bye.
Our next speaker is another civil engineer who works on tunnels. Martina Riessner is a tunnel engineer at Hatch who works as part of the construction management team for a wastewater treatment plant. She received her Bachelor of Applied Sciences in Civil Engineering at the University of British Columbia. So let's hear from Martina about what it takes to build a tunnel. Hi, Martina.
Hi.
We can't see you yet.
Okay,
That's
one second.
okay. All right. Now we can.
Okay, perfect.
Hello. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me today. Could you please introduce who you are and what your current career is?
Sure. Can I actually share screen? I have a presentation here that will give a bit of a better overview.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm sharing the wrong screen.
All good.
I'll just do it like this then. All right. So I have a Bachelor of Applied Science in Civil Engineering from UBC, and I've been working for the past year and a half as a project engineer for Hatch's Tunnels Group in Vancouver. Oh, no, sorry, can you see the screen?
Yeah, we can see the screen.
Okay, perfect. So you'll see there's two photos there. One of me is in work mode, and another one was taken when I was traveling around South America for 5 months between my last job and my current job. My current project is an upgrade to Annacis Island wastewater treatment plant. This includes 2 shafts constructed on the land and 1 in the river. And a tunnel boring machine is going to be dropped down these shafts. And you can see from the picture below that 40 meters below the surface, this tunnel boring machine is going to be constructing a tunnel under the Fraser River.
Martina, oh, sorry to interrupt, but we can't see your face. Do you want to move your camera a bit higher?
You're looking at a presentation now, though, right?
Yeah, we can see the presentation.
Oh, you can still see my face?
Yeah.
Oh, no. Okay.
All good. Perfect.
Okay. And actually, before moving on, I'll just show you the quick clip here of a tunnel boring machine. This very specialized equipment is actually being manufactured in France and Germany, and many of the engineers who are involved in the project are coming from overseas to work on it. At the front of the tunnel boring machine, you'll see the cutter head chewing through the ground ahead, and then that excavated material is pumped to the end of the tunnel boring machine and eventually out to the shaft. There's prefabricated concrete rings here that are being used to line the tunnel, and the machine also uses those rings to push off as it moves. This timeline here shows a little bit about myself. In 2008, I graduated from high school before starting at UBC. I used lifeguarding to help pay for my university. In 2010, I then transferred from science into engineering before starting an internship at Flatiron Construction and then at Metro Vancouver. In 2014, I graduated from UBC and started working in the Tetra Tech group for transportation engineering. I got my professional designation a few years later, and then I quit that job to spend a few months traveling around South America and Europe. I've been working at Hatch since 2018 as a project engineer in the tunnels group. Most of what I learned in school is not directly applicable to my job, and to be honest, I'm kind of happy about that. These two pictures show two very different courses I took. The top one is a lab-based course in which we were making concrete cylinders to then do strength testing on. The example below that is an example of a multivariable calculus course that I took and hated every minute of, and fortunately have never had to use on the job before. So school is a great opportunity to try many different things, and that will help you to explore where your interests lie. And also, very importantly, it'll help you to realize what you don't want to pursue. But luckily, there's many different career paths within civil engineering or engineering in general. My previous job was more design focused, whereas in this job, I made a definite decision to try and find a job where more field work was involved. There's also paths like product sales or research, which are again completely different depending on your personality type. Regardless of what interests you the most, I would highly recommend you to do internships in order to best prepare for the real world and to get a sense if your interests are actually what you think they are. We have a unique role on this project as the construction manager. We were hired by the owner to review the budget and costs that the contractor is incurring, and also to do tunnel inspection and check for safety and environmental compliance. We also have a different, very important role on this project, which is to liaise between all of these other companies, to make sure that people are communicating and to try and make sure that there's a positive work environment and teamwork between the different companies. This is a different role than the engineer who's responsible for designing the project. I'm lucky here because my office is right outside of the site. So anytime I want to look at what's happening on the job site or ask questions of the superintendent, it's only a 1 minute walk for me. And again, after having been based in an office job working 40 hours a week for the first 4 years of my career, this was a really important change for me. I think that everybody faces challenges during their career and finds times when they're overwhelmed and out of their element. Two big examples of this for me was when I first moved from a small town in northern BC to study at UBC. The UBC campus itself was more than twice as big as my hometown, and I didn't know anybody in Vancouver. Similarly, a few years later, I moved to Edmonton to do an internship on a construction site. And again, I didn't know anybody, and I felt like I was really out of my element. But looking back on these challenges, I think that they helped to develop resilience, and they were definitely defining milestones in my career. I also had some fantastic friendships come out of these experiences. And since this is a Women in STEM conference, I'd also like to mention that I haven't had any issues working in a male-dominated industry. I've been lucky to have excellent colleagues and mentors on all of my jobs. I would really advise not just people pursuing STEM fields, but for any career, the transferable skills can be incredibly important. Your interests may change many times over the years, and you may also encounter situations like layoffs and entire industries going out of business. But during these times, your other skills like teamwork, problem solving, and work ethic will serve you very well. This is part of the reason that I would highly recommend getting work experience if possible. And lastly, don't be afraid of changes or challenges in your career or in your life. Some things that may seem terrible in the moment, looking back on them can actually have been really important and positive experiences in your life. Furthermore, I would say you shouldn't be worried if you don't know exactly what you want to do right now. I definitely had no idea coming out of high school where I would end up 5 or 10 years down the road. Even though when I look at that timeline I made earlier, it seems to make a lot of sense, it actually felt a lot more like the line on the right than it did the line on the left when I was living each moment. I also think it's very important to maintain balance and to also make time for your other interests and relationships. Try to keep in mind that your career is a marathon and not a sprint, and don't forget to have fun along the way. I really love being part of a major infrastructure project. This 4-year project gives me a lot more of a sense of purpose than when I was working on smaller projects that only lasted a few weeks. It's also a great feeling to work together as a big team to try and accomplish this common goal over the next 4 years. As I mentioned earlier, finding a mix of office and site work was the right approach for me. And I think that most people will find that the people you work with make such a big difference in your career. I was lucky in all of my jobs to build some great relationships and to find mentorship among the senior engineers there. Lastly, I will also mention that a career in engineering provides more financial security than a lot of other jobs. I'm really grateful to be able to pursue a field that interests me, and also to have money to spare, to set aside in savings, to put towards my expensive interests like skiing and traveling, and not to have that extra stress. I've slowly started to take on more of a role of delegating work to others, which has been a very different experience for me than anything I've done before. But it's also been very interesting, and I'd like to continue to pursue this role as a leader within the company. Furthermore, a lot of decisions in engineering are made based on financial metrics. And on a day-to-day basis, most people don't have a lot of idea what goes into that. So it's also my goal to either through self-study or through pursuing an MBA to gain a better understanding of the business side of engineering. Last of all, I think it's very important to try and maintain a balance of career and personal life. I have a lot of personal goals as well as career goals, and I want to make sure that I'm giving them all the attention that they deserve. And that wraps up my presentation.
Thank you so much, Martina.
No problem.
I do have a few questions from the audience for you. Would you like to stop your screen share?
Yeah, sure. 1 second.
No problem. All right. So the first question is, how did you become interested in tunnels specifically?
So it wasn't actually tunnels that drew me to this job. It was being able to find a balance of field work and an office job. And the job was actually recommended to me by somebody I met through a Toastmasters program. And it used to be his job before he decided to go into insurance instead. And he was actually the one who said to me, I know you and I think that this position might be a great fit for you. So yeah, that ended up working out great.
Nice. And as for the video you showed earlier, what kind of knowledge would be needed to use a machine such as that?
I think a lot of it comes from experience, and that's why there's such specialized companies like based outside of Canada who manufacture these machines. There's only a handful of companies in the world, and a big part, so the different construction companies have to submit their qualifications before they're accepted for this job, and part of the evaluation of whether they're qualified or not is the amount of machines they've manufactured before and whether they've done similar ground conditions and things like that.
Would something like that be learned on the job or beforehand?
I think, in my experience, it would definitely have to be learned on the job. There may be some universities that would have more specialized, maybe master's or PhD programs related to tunnel engineering. but almost all of what I've learned across the board has been on the job, and it's great to be paid to learn. So I'm very happy about it.
Yeah. What is the most difficult thing about being a construction manager, and what is the most enjoyable?
Oh, that's a tough question. I think it can be challenging to try and mediate between different companies. For example, so it's the owner, in this case Metro Vancouver, who will be paying for the project. But if disputes come up between companies where there's like disagreement on who should be paying for things, having to try and mediate between that friction is a challenge. And that's part of why we invest a lot early on in the project to try and build good relationships between teams, and so that people see each other as individuals, not necessarily only as in conflicting roles in their jobs, kind of. So I guess that answered the hard question. As to what my favorite part of the job would be the people I work with, and also the chance to see things happening on site. When I spent 4 years in my previous job doing design work, there were not as many opportunities to see the construction happening on site, and I think that especially early in your career, it's very valuable and a great chance to stop staring at a computer screen for 8 hours a day.
Nice. What were the differences between your jobs in Edmonton versus here?
So when I worked in Edmonton, I was actually working for the construction company. So that would be, I was working for a different kind of organization. And that was full-time field work. But a lot of why I decided not to pursue the working for a construction company is just because I saw that the employees were working really long hours, 80 to 100 hours a week. And because work-life balance was important to me, I decided that that wasn't the right field for me.
Do tunnel engineers usually work on different kinds of tunnels, or are they usually specialized to a certain kind?
I guess there's two different areas that it can be specialized in. The tunnels will have different purposes. For example, the last project that I was working on was for LRT system in Calgary. So that would be for trains, whereas this one is for a sewage pipeline. But even though they're different outcomes, the methodology is pretty similar. The difference would come in depending on what type of material you're excavating, whether you're going through hard rock or soft ground. And that's where the different types of machines would come in.
What sorts of environmental considerations are put into each project?
So this project had a ton of environmental considerations because they will be doing some barge work on the Fraser River. So there was actually many years of consultation and environmental assessment before the project started. And I wasn't involved in that, but hearing about it from my coworkers definitely made me appreciate how much effort goes into those pre-construction phases.
Yeah. And what sorts of different types of professionals are you working with?
Like, what would their engineering backgrounds be, or?
Yeah, or other people as well.
Okay. Well, within our office, the people are generally specialized in like civil engineering, structural, geotechnical, or mechanical. In addition to that, we collaborate with a lot of trades on site. So there'll be carpenters on site. Soon there'll be field staff who are specialized in tunneling. And a lot of the subcontractors will again be specialized in their own fields, such as shaft construction or ground improvement.
Do you have any more advice for someone who wants to be a construction manager specifically?
I think, again, my biggest advice would just be to gain that field experience. Even if you are more interested in pursuing design in the long run, seeing things being constructed in person is very important early in your career, and it'll make you a better designer or construction manager down the road.
And in terms of the geographic location, what were some differences between Edmonton and Vancouver?
So Edmonton, I was working in transportation engineering, so that was all done on the surface. But in general, what's unique about our ground conditions here on site is that it's soft materials, it's a lot of silt and clay. And that ends up being a lot easier to tunnel through than hard rock, or what becomes the most challenging is when there's a mixture of both, when you have to try and find a machine that will perform well for the clays and silts and also for the harder material like boulders.
And do you have any favorite courses from university?
One course that I liked unexpectedly much was surveying, actually. I think that most construction and design projects will incorporate a lot of survey information. So it's important to have a good understanding of that. And because the format of it was just 1 or 2 weeks straight dedicated to one subject and doing a lot of like lab type work or field work, I thought that was one of the more practical ones that I took.
Awesome. That brings us to the end of our talk today. Thank you so much for all the effort you put into your presentation and for your
Yes, thanks for having me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Awesome. All right, our next speaker is our last speaker as well, and she also happens to be our youngest, but she has accomplished an amazing organization which is called Girls to the Power of Math, which strives to increase girls' confidence in math. So let's hear from Alexa. Alexa has a presentation she'll be sharing with us before we ask her some questions. Hi, Alexa.
Hello, can you see me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, I'm really happy to be here. My name is Alexa Bailey. I'm a grade 9 student at Sir Charles Tupper Secondary School in Vancouver, and today I'm going to be telling you a little bit about an intervention program I started called Girls to the Power of Math. So I'm going to share my screen, I think.
Yeah.
Does that work? Yeah. Why isn't it working? Is it working?
It's probably loading, or you can try again.
Okay. You still see me, or?
I can't see you.
Okay. Oh, there we go.
Nice.
Did that work?
Yeah.
Now you can see your...
Yeah.
You can see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, Girls to the Power of Math is a girl-to-girl mentoring program where high school girls mentor elementary school girls to boost their confidence in math. Before I tell you about how this project came about, I'd like to share a little about my own experiences in math. Throughout elementary, I witnessed my teachers and classmates' bias that boys are better than girls in math. However, numerous studies have proven that there is no difference in math ability between genders. My grade 5 teacher said I couldn't be good in math because I wasn't the fastest. I focused on getting the right answer and on helping others. In grade 6, the teacher asked the class to guess who got the highest grade on a math test. The class guessed every single boy, but not one girl. They were surprised to find out it was me. In high school, I found even the accelerated program was too slow for me. I ended up going out of the class to complete grade 8, 9, and 10 math in 1 year, and now I'm doing grade 11. But the path to getting to a point where I felt challenged was not smooth. If someone like me, who is pretty resilient, struggled against bias in the system, what will happen to other girls? Despite my challenging experiences, I've kept my love of math, and I wanted to help other girls. I started tutoring my neighbor in math and found that through the use of fun games, her confidence and grades improved. This led me to wonder if confidence in math differs between genders and if it could be playing a role in the gender gap in STEM-related fields. I decided to pursue this question in my grade 8 science fair. My project involved surveying elementary children to assess math confidence. My science teacher told me that this project was difficult and needed a mentor. I emailed many people across Canada and was delighted when Dr. Tony Schmader answered. Dr. Schrader is the Canadian Research Chair for Social Psychology at the University of British Columbia. She is also the Consortium Director for Engendering Success in STEM. I used visuals like these so that the survey could easily be understood by young students from kindergarten through grade 7. To minimize bias, I asked questions about confidence in math, reading, timed tasks, and puzzles, as well as assessing general academic confidence. I approached the local elementary schools and talked to the principals. The principals were supportive of the project, but participation was up to the teachers and the parents of the students. In the end, around 300 students, ranging from kindergarten to grade 7, participated in the study. It was very hard to organize so many people. Once all the data was collected, Dr. Schmader helped me with my statistical analysis. The results showed no significant difference in confidence between girls and boys in either math or reading. However, there was a significant trend for girls to become less confident in math over time, and for boys to become more confident in reading. More specifically, I found that girls tend to lose confidence by grade 6. This is consistent with previous research. It is important to note that girls did not lose confidence in any other domain I surveyed. This lack of confidence in math may contribute to fewer girls pursuing STEM-related fields in post-secondary. I found the decline in girls' confidence in math concerning. I decided to do something about it. That's how I had the idea for Girls to the Power of Math. Based on my tutoring experience, I wanted to create a fun environment where older girls mentor younger girls in math. A pilot program was run at David Livingston Elementary in Vancouver. The program targets skip counting and multiplication in grade 3 girls and is run for a group of girls over 10 weeks. I have also teamed up with Dr. Andy Barron from UBC to evaluate the effectiveness of the program on improving confidence. All participants complete a survey before and after the program. I want to give you an idea of the kinds of activities we are doing in Girls to the Power of Math. We use active games like skipping and ball games, songs and art to reinforce the ideas we are teaching. Here's a little video of the song we learned about multiplication. 2, 4, 6, 8, counting numbers really great. 10, 12, 14, the next number is 16. Times it by 2, you try to see a map. It's quicker and better than if you were to tell. Oh, it's 2 groups of 4. Oh, the answer is 8. 18, 20, 22, or 24. That's up to 12, and after that, 16 is more. I got great feedback from the parents and participants of the pilot. I won the North American award called Girls Living STEM. One of the parents nominated me for the CBC Early Edition Nice List, and her daughter Maisie was interviewed. Here's what Maisie said.
I am Maisie, and I am 8 years old. I go to David Livingston Elementary School. If you come into this program, you're going to have a very good experience in math. It's fun, and it pushes you, but not hard.
One of the biggest challenges was finding the time to run this program. Although the feedback was great and my desire to continue the program was there, I was burnt out and overwhelmed. I knew that I needed to reach out for help. Dr. Schmader invited me to the Engendering Success in STEM Consortium. Through this networking, I learned about grant opportunities to expand the program. I applied for one and received the grant. I continued networking and reached out to Learning Buddies Network, LBN, a nonprofit organization that offers free tutoring in math and reading to elementary school kids. They agreed to take on Girls to the Power of Math as one of their programs. I am now working on a manual and kits so that we can run the program in more schools. Girls to the Power of Math will now run through LBN. High school girls can be great mentors for younger girls. If you have an interest in being a mentor, please reach out to me. Not only will you gain leadership skills and volunteer hours, you will inspire our next generation of female mathematicians and help keep girls' confidence in math. I gained a lot of experience in doing this project. I learned how to find mentors, to work with university professors, to present my findings and respond to questions, to do radio interviews and podcasts, to apply for grants, and to present a business proposal. This is all over and above learning about research and statistics. One of the biggest things I learned is that one cannot do a project like this alone. I had to reach out for help. I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone who helped me along the way. These are my contacts. If you would like to look into volunteer opportunities, you can contact me through my email or learn more at Learning Buddies website and follow our Instagram and YouTube channel. Okay. Let's see if I can stop sharing. Did that work?
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you for your presentation, Alexa. And we also will be putting the link to your all your contact info and your website below below this video. So we have some questions from the audience. What was the biggest challenge you had in starting Girls Through the Power of Math?
Well, definitely having enough time to run the program. It's a big job. It's basically a full-time job on top of my school load, which is a lot of work for me. I had to respond to emails, create the lesson plans, find mentors, find volunteers, and people to participate in the program. So yeah, it was very time-consuming. Yeah.
And what was the biggest thing that made you want to start the program?
Well, after seeing my results from the study I did for my science fair, and seeing that girls' confidence in math decreased as they grew older, I found that really concerning, and I didn't want that to happen, so I decided to create the program.
What's your favorite part about it?
My favorite part of the program is seeing the girls smile and laugh when we're playing games and math. It's really great to see them have that love for math, and that's really the goal of the program.
And could you please describe some more of the activities that you get to do with the girls?
Sure. One game that they really enjoyed was, I don't know if you've ever played the What Time Is It, Mr. Wolf? Basically, it's kind of like Go Stop, but you'll ask, what time is it, Mr. Wolf? And he'll say 12 o'clock, and you'll take 12 steps. So it's the same principle, but it's what times is it, Mrs. Wolf? And we ask the question, and she'll give us a times table. For example, 3 times 6, and we'll have to skip count by 6 3 times until we get to it. So, yeah.
Nice. Is there any advice you would like to share for anyone hoping to start their own organization?
Find something that motivates you, that you're passionate about, because if you're really passionate about it, it shows, and people want to help you if you're passionate about it. And yeah, so make sure you're enjoying what you're doing, and you are fighting for a cause that you want to fight for. Yeah.
Awesome. And what are your hopes for the future with Girls Through the Power of Math?
Well, I hope it will be run through many schools. With LBN taking it on, it's going to be running through more schools, but any schools that might be interested in running it in their school, or high school students that have a sister school that's younger that they would like to run the program in, that would be great to reach out and suggest that, because anybody who's interested, we want to get this program out and available for as many kids as possible.
Um, Now we have a question from the audience. So in your research, was there any specific reason why girls' confidence decreased over the years in math?
So I don't know what the reason could be for it decreasing. All I surveyed was their levels of confidence, and I saw that it was decreasing. There could be many factors. There could be stereotypes that influence learning, just stereotypes in the community that boys are better at math than girls, stuff like that. It could be that they don't see as much representation of women in STEM in the media. It could be to do with teachers. Really, I have no way of knowing because that's not what I surveyed. And there could be many different variables that could influence it. Yeah.
And another question from the audience is, how did you find your mentors?
I emailed a bunch of people saying, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm interested in, would you like to help me, really? And and I just emailed a bunch of people that might be interested in it, and one responded, which is great. And then after that was for my first mentor, and for Dr. Andy Barron, I networked through Dr. Schrader. And so networking, finding as many people, that's a great way to do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on today, and we'll put all your information below.
Okay, thank you very much for having me.
No problem.
Bye.
Hello. Thank you for continuing to watch. That is the end of our speakers, and I would like to give a big thank you to all our speakers for taking the time to join us today. So my friend Annie is just gonna join the chat in order to show us some slides while I thank all the people who need to be thanked and talk a bit more about quantum leaps. This was supposed to happen at the beginning, but there were a few technological issues on my part, so luckily we can do it now. Annie. Hi, Annie.
Yes, I will share my screen.
Thank you so much. All right.
Is it sharing?
Yes.
Okay.
So first of all, I'd like to give a big thank you to everyone who watched, my friends, my family, and some strangers. So thank you for joining us today. It's definitely been a process because we had originally wanted to have an in-person conference with all of these amazing speakers and more, and we were going to have some interactive workshops that would have involved a lot more activities, but due to the coronavirus and having to socially isolate, we decided to move it all onto this live stream. So Annie, if you skip a few slides, I'll be able to show you what our conference usually looks like. Okay, 1 second. 6. Here. So, Quantum Leaps is a student-run organization that is a nonprofit with a mission to empower female students to pursue their dreams in STEM, post-secondary education, and careers. We host an annual in-person conference at Simon Fraser University, and throughout this day, students get to participate in these workshops and watch keynote speeches from inspirational women from various aspects of STEM. So on your left, you can see one of our speakers from last year showing some histology slides to all her students. And on the right, we have 2 civil engineers and girls looking at drafting. So I first attended this conference in 2018, and I really enjoyed getting exposed to all different fields, particularly genetics, because that was a workshop. And from then on, I've always been really interested in genetics, and I've become involved in other experiences involving that aspect of biology. So I wanted other students to have the same rewarding experience as I did, so I applied to be the marketing director for last year's conference. And that was a great experience. So these are also a few more workshops involving tunnel engineering, I believe, and some more mathematics. Right. So our mission is to empower young women to view STEM as something that they are totally capable of, because, as Alexa mentioned, girls often don't see women represented in STEM in the media, but also in the workforce. So, according to Statistics Canada, in 2016, although women made up the majority of bachelor's degree holders, as you can see, over 50%, they only made up 34% of STEM bachelor's degree holders, and just 23% of science and technology workers among Canadians aged 24 to 64. The issue of women's representation in STEM is often discussed as leaks in the STEM pipeline, with the percentage of women decreasing as you move on from bachelor's degree to master's and PhD, and then the workforce, and even fewer patent holders and Nobel laureates. So we want to do our part in showing young women that there are lots of women who are fully capable, and not only capable but successful in their fields. The underrepresentation of women in STEM is widely recognized as detrimental to women, as these occupations, particularly engineering. There we go. So, as we all know, women leaders have been doing a great job of handling the pandemic, because they are acknowledging that coronavirus is impacting lives and not just being focused on the economy. What's more, they acknowledge that it was actually real from the very beginning, for the most part. And I just wanted to highlight some of some Canadian chief medical officers, many of whom are women. There's Dr. Teresa Tam, who is Canada's chief medical officer, and here in BC we have Dr. Bonnie Henry, the provincial medical officer, and Vancouver's Dr. Patricia Daly. So, Addie, you can skip over this slide because it was more of an introduction, but okay. I also just wanted to highlight all of the amazing women who are making a difference in environmentalism too. So now I wanted to give a huge thank you to my team. I could not have done it without them. These are grade 11 and 12 girls who are super busy with school, and there are many extracurriculars and things they do to enjoy themselves and take mental health breaks, but they were super passionate about bringing girls together to show them all the opportunities that they can have in STEM and be inspired by the women that we saw today. So also thank you to Sarah Dong for being our amazing photographer. So a bit of a self-introduction. I am a reader, writer, playlist maker, and cookie baker. In addition, I love the outdoors and making s'mores. I play the violin and the ukulele, and my interests are in oncology and genetics, and I've had the amazing opportunity to work with BC cancer researchers on a genetics and oncology project. So next, we have Susan, who is our amazing secretary. She also loves music, and she's in the jazz band and orchestra, and she's the co-president of her school's mental health awareness club. She loves Animal Crossing, sharks, and Pride and Prejudice, and she's interested in computer science and environmental science. This is Annie, and she's a media director. She's a swimmer and swim coach, co-captain of her school's Duke of Edinburgh Club. She loves eating out and watching YouTube, and she's interested in engineering, math, and data science. Annie and I have not only organized this conference together, but we've also portaged a 2-person canoe over 10 kilometers on a 6-day camping trip, so fun fact.
That was a memorable experience.
For sure. This is Rach, who I first met at soccer, and she was our amazing marketing director, getting lots more people involved. She's a hiker, baker, and knitter, and she's the captain of her school's knit service club, where they knit blankets for charities and nonprofit organizations. She's watched almost as many Netflix shows as the number of hobbies she's tried, and she's interested in psychiatry and neurology. Jillian is our amazing treasurer. She's a TikTok enthusiast and lover of skincare products, and she misses eating out during quarantine almost as much as she misses her friends. She's interested in biotech and medicinal chemistry. And next year she will be another one of our exec members as most of us move on to university. This is Rachel, and she's our graphic designer who made our YouTube thumbnail, which will go up again, as well as our logo and all the graphics you've seen today. She's gone to Vex Robotics Globals, where she first became interested in STEM, and she can skateboard. She loves reading and taking care of animals, and she's interested in biomedical engineering. So a big thank you to SWIST, who is our main sponsor. They're the Society for Canadian Women in Science and Technology, and I'd like to particularly thank Heidi, Ashley, and Paloma, who we saw today, for sharing our event with the community. Go to the SWIST website if you're interested in becoming a mentor for youth or volunteering at various events. And as well, if you're interested in hosting your own quantum leaps near you, you can check their website out for how to do that. Thank you to the Association of Consulting Engineering Companies of British Columbia, and specifically to Brett, who connected us with some of our engineering speakers today, the 2 bridge engineers, Anna and Jessica, and Martina, our tunnel engineer. So check their website out for events and career opportunities. A big thank you to the West Coast Women in Engineering, Science and Technology, particularly at Simon Fraser University. And thank you to Amy for bringing awareness of our event to that organization. And thank you to Charlie at SFU Applied Sciences for helping us with our in-person conference before it was sadly cancelled. A big thank you to the Female Laboratory of Innovative Knowledge and the co-founder Michelle, who featured us in her newsletter and her social media. Flick is a platform for female apprentices to connect with female founders. So if you're interested in business, this is a great opportunity. And as well, I know that there are many STEM founders who would be happy to connect with you. Lastly, you can find us on Instagram or Facebook, and if you want to hear more about our future conferences. Thank you everyone again for tuning in, and I hope you learned a lot and have been inspired by the amazing work that women are doing in STEM. Thank you so much.